Gather close. This is ghost stories to tell in the dark. Tonight, I'll share with you not one, but many strange encounters, each more haunting than the last. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from, so we can map the reach of our haunted circle. Story number 1. The attic smelled of damp wood and decades-old dust. The kind that clings to the back of your throat like a memory you can't quite cough up. And as I pushed aside the yellowed boxes of Christmas decorations and my mother's moth-eaten wedding dress, my fingers brushed against something smooth and familiar. The edge of the Ouija board, its once glossy surface now dulled by time but still unmistakable. The letters and numbers faded but legible. The planchette tucked neatly beside it like it had been waiting for me. I hadn't thought about this thing in years, not since I was a child, but the moment my skin touched the board, a cold sweat prickled down my spine, and the air around me thickened, as if the attic itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was just nostalgia, just the weirdness of finding a relic from a childhood I'd barely remembered. But then my hands, moving almost against my will, flipped the board open, and the planchette slid onto the surface with a quiet thud. And before I could stop myself, my fingertips were resting on it, light as a whisper. The moment they made contact, the temperature dropped, my breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. And then, oh God, the planchette moved, not the slow, deliberate motion of a child's game, but a violent jerk, like something had grabbed it from beneath. And it shot to the yes, so fast I gasped, my heart slamming against my ribs. I tried to pull my hands away, but they were stuck, glued to the planchette as it began to move again, spelling out letters with terrifying precision. You broke our pact. The words sent a jolt through me, a flash of something, a memory, of a shadowy figure with two long fingers and a smile that stretched too wide, of a whispered promise I'd made when I was too young to understand what it meant, of a cold, skeletal hand slipping a ring onto my finger, a ring I'd thought was just a toy, just pretend. My stomach lurched, and I wrenched my hands free, stumbling back, the board clattering to the floor, but the damage was done. The air was alive now, humming with a presence I couldn't see but could feel, a weight pressing against my chest, a breath on the back of my neck that smelled of rotting flowers and damp earth. I fled the attic, my legs weak, my pulse roaring in my ears, and when I reached the bathroom, I splashed water on my face, trying to shake the dread coiling in my gut. But when I looked up into the mirror, my reflection wasn't alone. Behind me, a skeletal hand rested on my shoulder, its fingers curled possessively, the bone yellowed and cracked, and on its ring finger, a matching band to the one I still wore, the one I'd never been able to take off, the one that had suddenly turned ice cold against my skin. I screamed, but no sound came out, my voice stolen by the thing in the mirror, its hollow eyes staring into mine, its lipless mouth stretching into a grin as the planchette, somehow now on the bathroom counter, began to move on its own, spelling out its final message. Time to come home, wife. The last thing I felt before the darkness swallowed me whole was the skeletal hand tightening its grip, pulling me backward into the mirror, into the waiting arms of a groom I'd promised myself to long ago, a groom who had never been imaginary at all. The darkness wasn't empty. It was thick, suffocating, like being buried alive in wet soil, and I could feel things moving around me, brushing against my skin with fingers that were too long and too cold, their touch leaving trails of frostbite in their wake. And the air smelled like an open grave, like damp earth and something sweetly rotten, the scent clinging to the back of my throat as I tried to scream, but my voice was gone, stolen by the same force that had dragged me through the mirror, the same force that now held me in a grip so tight I could feel my bones grinding together. The ring on my finger burned with a cold fire, searing into my flesh as if branding me, and I remembered, God, I remembered, the game I had played as a child, the way the planchette had moved so eagerly under my small hands, the way the voice in my head had whispered promises of friendship, of love, of forever, and how I had giggled when it asked me to marry it, how I had said yes, how I had slipped on that plastic ring from a gumball machine and sworn myself away without understanding the weight of those words. Now in the dark, I heard that voice again, not in my mind but all around me, a chorus of whispers that slithered into my ears like worms, saying my name over and over, saying wife, saying mine, saying you promised, and the pressure around me shifted, the skeletal hands pulling me deeper into the abyss, where the air grew thicker and the cold became unbearable, where something waited for me, something vast and hungry and ancient, something that had been patient for decades, biding. It's time until I was old enough to fulfill the pact. I thrashed, I begged, I sobbed, but the darkness drank my tears, swallowed my cries, and all the while, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they weren't whispers at all but a deafening roar. 1,000 voices screaming in unison as the hands finally dragged me into the heart of the void, where a shape began to form. A figure in tattered bridal finery, its face a shifting nightmare of stretched skin and hollow eyes, its arms open in a mockery of an embrace, its mouth splitting into a grin that showed too many teeth, teeth that glinted like broken glass as it whispered, "Welcome home." And then the hands were pushing me forward, forcing me into that awful embrace, the stench of decay filling my nose as the thing that called itself my husband pressed its lipless mouth against mine in a kiss that tasted of grave dirt and old blood. And as the darkness closed in around us, as my vision blurred and my body went numb, I heard one last whisper, not from it, but from somewhere far away, from the world I'd left behind. The sound of a planchette scraping across a Ouija board, spelling out a single, final word, goodbye. The world dissolved into a nightmare of shifting shadows and grasping hands. My body no longer my own as the thing that claimed me pulled me deeper into its realm. A place where the walls pulsed like living flesh, and the air itself vibrated with a low, guttural hum that resonated in my skull like a funeral dirge. My wedding ring had fused to my finger, the skin around it blackening as if rotted from within, and every time I tried to claw it off, the skeletal hands would tighten their grip, their jagged nails drawing blood that dripped onto the unseen floor with a sound like distant weeping. The thing, my husband, never spoke again, but its presence was everywhere, a suffocating weight against my back, its breath like winter wind against my neck as it guided me through corridors that twisted in impossible ways, doors opening into voids where faces I almost recognized screamed silently, their mouths sewn shut with threads of shadow. I tried to remember my old life, my parents' faces, the sunlight, but the memories slipped through my fingers like smoke, replaced by flashes of that childhood game. The way the planchette had moved without me touching it, the way my imaginary friend had always been just a little too real, its voice a little too clear in my ear. Now in this hellish consummation of our marriage, I understood. It had never been imaginary at all. The air grew thicker, the stench of decay now mingled with something sweet and cloying, like funeral flowers left to mold, and ahead, in the darkness, a faint glow pulsed like a dying ember, drawing me forward even as every instinct screamed to run. The skeletal hands pushed me toward it, and as I stumbled closer, the glow resolved into the shape of a bed. An altar really, its sheets stained with old blood, its pillows indented as if someone had been waiting there for a very long time. The whispers returned, not just around me but inside me now, slithering through my veins like poison, and I realized with dawning horror that they were my own thoughts, twisted and gnarled, repeating the same phrase over and over. You promised, you promised, you promised. The thing behind me pressed closer, its bony fingers tracing the curve of my spine with a lover's familiarity, and I knew with terrible certainty what came next. The final sealing of the pact, the moment I would cease to be myself and become something else, its wife in truth, bound to this hell for eternity. The bed loomed before me, the sheets rustling as if inviting me to lie down, and as the skeletal hands forced me onto the mattress, the last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was the Ouija board, impossibly there, resting on a nightstand that hadn't been there a second ago, its planchette already moving, spelling out a new message just for me. Till death do us part. And then the weight of my husband was upon me, his touch like ice and fire, his voice, finally mercifully, drowning out my screams as the world dissolved into nothingness, leaving only the echo of that childhood vow, now fulfilled in the worst way possible. Somewhere, far away, a child giggled, a planchette moved, and another foolish little girl said yes. The silence that followed was worse than the screams. a hollow, yawning void where even my own heartbeat sounded muffled, as if the thing that now owned me had swallowed that too, leaving only the faintest echo of what I once was, a ghost trapped in a body that no longer felt like mine. The bed, our marriage bed, had become my entire world, its stained sheets clinging to me like a second skin, the weight of my husband pressing down in a mockery of intimacy, his skeletal fingers tracing patterns on my flesh that burned like brands, each touch etching another piece of him into me, another chain binding me to this nightmare. I tried to move, to fight, but my limbs were leaden, my muscles slack, as if the very will to resist had been siphoned away, leaving only a numb, shuddering terror that pulsed through me with every ragged breath. The darkness around us shifted, whispering secrets in a language I shouldn't understand but did, the words slithering into my mind like serpents, coiling around my thoughts until I couldn't remember if they were mine or his. The ring on my finger had become part of me now, the blackened flesh spreading, tendrils of rot creeping up my wrist like vines, and with each passing moment, I felt myself unraveling, my memories fraying at the edges, my name slipping away like sand through grasping fingers. The thing that was my husband didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence was a constant, suffocating reminder of what I had become, of what I had agreed to all those years ago when I was just a child playing a game I didn't understand. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of old blood and spoiled roses, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint, familiar scrape of the planchette moving across the board, spelling out words I couldn't see but could feel, each letter carving itself into my soul with razor-sharp precision. The bed beneath me groaned, the sheets twisting around my limbs like living things, pulling me deeper into the mattress, into the darkness, into him, and as the last remnants of my humanity slipped away, I realized with a final, gut-wrenching horror that this was only the beginning, that eternity stretched before me, an unending nightmare of cold hands and whispered vows, of a marriage consummated in shadow and sealed in blood. And then, just as the last flicker of my resistance faded, the planchette moved one final time, its message searing into my mind like a brand, forever. The word echoed in the silence, a promise, a curse, and as the darkness closed in for good, I felt his lips, cold and lifeless, press against mine in a kiss that tasted of the grave, and I knew, with a certainty that shattered what was left of my soul, that I would never wake up again. Time lost all meaning in that suffocating void, measured only by the slow, creeping decay of my own body. The way my skin grew sallow and tight over bones that ached with unnatural cold. The way my hair thinned into wispy strands like cobwebs left to rot in some forgotten corner. The way my reflection, when I dared glimpse it in the fractured shards of broken mirrors that sometimes materialized in the gloom, became less human with each passing moment. My husband, that grinning skeletal horror, was always there, a silent sentinel in the shadows, his hollow eyes watching as I withered, as the last remnants of my warmth were leached away by the relentless chill of this place. The whispers never ceased, their voices now indistinguishable from my own thoughts, murmuring of devotion, of obedience, of love, the words twisting in my skull until I found myself mouthing them back, my voice a dry rasp that no longer sounded like me. The Ouija board was always nearby, a constant torment, its planchette drifting lazily across the surface as if moved by unseen hands, spelling out fragments of my past life, my mother's name, my childhood street, the date of my birth, only to mock me with them before wiping them away like dust. I tried to scream, to curse it, to beg for mercy, but my throat had long since closed up, my vocal cords shredded from useless pleas, and all that escaped was a thin, rattling wheeze that made my husband's grin widen, his bony fingers stroking my cheek in perverse approval. The rot had spread past my wrist now, crawling up my arm in inky tendrils, and with it came a numbness that was almost a relief, a respite from the constant, gnawing terror, until I realized, with a jolt of fresh horror, that I no longer cared. The realization was worse than the pain, worse than the fear. I was becoming like him. The bed, our bed, had become a prison of moldering silk and rusted bed springs, the stains spreading like ink blots, and when I lay upon it, I could feel something moving beneath me, something alive in the mattress, its breath hot and damp against my back. My husband joined me there often, his weightless form pressing down, his hands exploring my decaying body with a grotesque parody of tenderness. And though I wanted to recoil, to fight, my limbs would no longer obey, my will eroded to nothing. The last time I struggled, he had simply laughed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across concrete. And the Ouija board had spelled out a single word, wifely. The message was clear. Resistance was pointless. I belonged to him now, in every way that mattered. The final shred of my humanity clung desperately, a flickering ember in the dark. But even that was fading, guttering out beneath the weight of eternity. And then one day or night, it was impossible to tell. The board spelled out something new, anniversary. My husband's grip tightened around my skeletal hand, his jagged nails drawing black ichor from my paper-thin skin. And as the walls around us pulsed with a sickly, phosphorescent glow, I understood. A year had passed. A year since I'd found the board. A year since I'd come home. The planchette moved again, slower this time, as if savoring the words, "Many more to come." And as the darkness swallowed me whole once more, I realized with dull, horrifying certainty that it was right. There would be no end, no escape. Only this, cold hands, whispered vows, and a marriage that would last long after the world I'd once known had crumbled to dust. Somewhere in some distant attic, another Ouija board waited. Another child's fingers brushed the planchette. Another voice, giggling and oblivious, said yes. And the cycle began anew. The realization that I was becoming part of the haunting rather than its victim crept over me like frost on a grave. Slow, inevitable, irreversible. My flesh growing translucent as the boundaries between my body and the oppressive darkness blurred. My bones protruding in sharp angles that mirrored my husband's grotesque silhouette. Our forms entwining in a grotesque matrimony of rot and shadow. The whispers had become my own voice now, murmuring to unseen listeners beyond the veil, coaxing them closer with promises of friendship, of love, of games to play. Just as I had been lured all those years ago, my childish laughter now replaced by a rasping chuckle that slithered from my throat unbidden. The attic where this began felt like a distant dream, but the board, oh, the board was always present, materializing from the gloom when my thoughts strayed too far toward resistance. Its planchette quivering with anticipation before dragging itself in slow, deliberate arcs, recounting my sins in jagged letters. Broken promise, unfaithful, runaway. My husband would stroke my brittle hair whenever these accusations surfaced, his touch both admonishment and twisted comfort, his jaw unhinging to release a sigh that reeked of opened caskets and forgotten crypts, the sound vibrating through my hollow chest like a second heartbeat. I'd begun noticing changes, not just in myself, but in the fabric of this limbo. New corridors branching off into deeper darkness, rooms furnished with relics of other lives. A tiny hair ribbon crusted with blood, a collection of milk teeth strung on wire, a child's sock still caked in mud. These were his trophies. I realized with a nausea that no longer had a stomach to twist. Remnants of other wives, other promises, a lineage of the damned stretching back further than I could fathom. The worst moments came when the veil thinned, when some poor soul above brushed a Ouija board's surface, their naive invocation rippling through my prison like a shockwave, their frightened gasps as the planchette moved without their touch sending a perverse thrill through my decaying nerves. I could feel them, these new playmates, their warmth like a beacon in the endless night, and the part of me that was still human wept while the thing I was becoming licked cracked lips in hunger. My husband would press close during these tremors, his ribcage vibrating against my back in approval, our skeletal fingers interlacing as we listened to the distant, muffled screams of the newly claimed. The ring on my finger had corroded into my bone, a blackened band fused to my very essence, and when I caught glimpses of my reflection, in the oily surface of standing water, in the warped glass of a phantom window, I no longer saw the woman who had stumbled upon that cursed board. I saw only a bride of the abyss, her hollow eyes gleaming with stolen life, her mouth stretched in a rictus grin not unlike her husband's. The final surrender came on no particular day. Time had long since ceased to hold meaning. When the board appeared before me without provocation, its planchette already clutched in my claw-like hand, the other end gripped by a small, ghostly child whose face I almost recognized. My throat produced a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh as I realized the cruel joke. I was now the thing that guided the planchette, the specter coercing the next generation into damnation. My husband's laughter echoed through the void as my traitorous hand began to move, spelling out words that tasted like ashes on my tongue. "Let's play a game." The child, so trusting, so achingly familiar, giggled in response, her tiny fingers pressing harder against the planchette, her voice chirping the words that would doom her as they had doomed me. Yes! And as the darkness swelled to claim its new prize, I finally understood the true horror of my fate. Not just to suffer, but to perpetuate the cycle, an eternal bride, an unending nightmare, a whispered warning that would never reach living ears. The last thing I saw before the void consumed us both was the board's final message, spelled out in the frantic jerks of the child's stolen hand. "Welcome to the family." Then nothing. Then everything. Then never again. The transformation completed itself in silent, grotesque increments, my fingernails lengthening into yellowed claws perfect for scraping against floorboards in the dead of night, my joints popping and reversing like a doll's limbs as I learned to move through walls with the other husks of forgotten wives, our tattered wedding gowns whispering against dimensions we now navigated with predatory ease. The hunger came next, not for food but for fear, that bright electric spark of living terror we could taste through the veil whenever some foolish child whispered Bloody Mary into a mirror or chanted ghost stories at sleepovers, their breathless anticipation like a dinner bell ringing through the underworld. My husband had grown stronger with each soul we claimed together, his form now shifting between a dozen nightmare shapes. Sometimes the handsome groom from my childhood fantasies with lips sewn shut with grave worms, other times a towering mass of wedding bands fused together with the calcified remains of his brides, their hollow eye sockets weeping black tears as they reached for me in grotesque sisterhood. The attic where this began had become a sacred site in our unholy communion, a wound between worlds we could press our faces against like prisoners peering through barred windows, watching with insectal interest as new generations of children dared each other to touch the board we'd left waiting. Always waiting, its surface now stained with the psychic residue of countless summonings. Tonight's offering was a girl of maybe 8, her pigtails bouncing as she giggled with friends, their combined fingertips barely covering the planchette as they shrieked at imagined movements, unaware of the truth, that the real danger wasn't the plastic slider, but the dozens of skeletal hands guiding it from beneath, our bony fingers passing through theirs like smoke through a screen door. I felt my husband's presence coil around me, his pride radiating like freezer burn as I leaned forward, my lipless mouth nearly brushing the girl's ear as I exhaled the same words once whispered to me. "Marry me?" The planchette jerked toward yes before the child could react, her laughter dying as the overhead light flickered. Our signal, our tradition, and in that perfect moment between innocence and understanding, I saw my own face reflected in her widening pupils, no longer a victim but the nightmare itself. My hollow sockets filled with writhing darkness as the first icy fingers of my wedding ring began materializing around her tiny finger. The other brides stirred in the shadows, their collective sigh like wind through a mausoleum as the newest recruit opened her mouth to scream, the sound swallowed whole by the hungry dark. Somewhere beyond the veil, a mother would soon climb attic stairs to find an empty room, a toppled board, and a single word burned into the wood grain where her daughter had knelt, wife. My husband's laughter shook the foundations of worlds as I turned to greet our shivering new sister, her transformation already beginning, the cycle unbroken, the feast eternal. The board sat waiting. Another game would begin soon. The hunger never dulls, never fades. It gnaws at the hollow where my soul once resided, a ceaseless craving for the sweet terror of the living, their pounding hearts like drums calling us forth from the between places where we lurk, our spectral fingers tracing the edges of their reality like spiders testing a web's vibrations. The newest bride, that pigtailed girl whose name I've already stolen from her trembling lips, huddles in the corner of our shared nightmare, her once bright eyes now clouding over with the same milky film that covers mine, her tiny hands twisting the phantom wedding band that binds her to us, to him, to this endless procession of stolen lives. My husband watches her with that same terrible patience he once showed me, his form tonight a towering silhouette of fused wedding rings, the skeletal fingers of countless brides protruding from the gaps like grisly charms on a bracelet, their bony digits twitching in unison as another tremor of potential ripples through the void. Somewhere asleep over a dare, a giggling circle of girls placing their trusting hands on a board that wasn't there moments before. The attic is always the beginning but never the end, a sacred hunting ground where the veil wears thin as old lace, and tonight we can feel it happening again. That delicious moment when curiosity overrides common sense, when the first giggle of "is someone there?" slips past living lips and into our waiting ears. My body, if this rotting mockery can still be called such, moves without thought now, drawn to the summoning like a moth to flame, my tattered wedding gown whispering across dimensions as I press against the other side of their reality, my breath frosting the mirror they've foolishly placed beside their makeshift seance. The planchette moves before they touch it, their screams music to our hollowed ears, their scrambling attempts to break the circle only tightening the noose. They don't understand that the real danger wasn't inviting us in, but realizing too late they can't make us leave. My husband's laughter shakes the foundations of worlds as the strongest girl. The ringleader, always the brave one, reaches for the board to flip it over, her fingers passing through the wood as if it were smoke, her scream cutting off abruptly as my newest sister, the pigtailed bride, materializes just behind her, small hands clutching the girl's shoulders with unnatural strength. The others see only darkness, only shadows, but the chosen one, always the brave one, sees us all, sees the procession of brides stretching back centuries, sees the altar of bones waiting in the void, sees the truth in my husband's endless grin. The board spells its final message in frantic jerks as we claim our latest sister, till death. The living girls will wake tomorrow with gaps in their memory, with nightmares they can't explain, with an instinctive fear of attics and mirrors and boards with alphabet letters. But the brave one, she'll wake somewhere else entirely, her fingernails already blackening, her reflection slowly fading from mirrors, her first whispered words as a bride echoing our eternal vow. I do. The hunger eases for now. The board sits waiting. The veil grows thinner every night. And somewhere, a child is slipping a plastic ring onto her finger, giggling at her imaginary friend's marriage proposal, utterly unaware of the skeletal hands reaching up through the floorboards to claim their newest wife. The passage of centuries means nothing here in the hollow dark where we brides dwell, our existence measured not in years, but in the steady rhythm of fresh terrors harvested. Each new victim's first scream as they realize their reflection no longer matches their flesh, the wet crunch of their bones reshaping to accommodate the engagement ring materializing beneath their skin. The delicious moment when their pleading shifts from "let me go" to "let me in" as they press their faces against bedroom, mirrors trying to rejoin the world they lost. My husband's kingdom expands with each new bride, the borders of his domain pushing deeper into the living world. Attic shadows growing teeth, childhood toys whispering in the dark, every abandoned Ouija board in every thrift store humming with trapped malice waiting to be awakened. I've become something worse than a ghost, a primal thing that feeds on the electric moment when a babysitter hears the planchette move in the next room, when a teenager's just for fun seance turns to choking terror as the glass shatters beneath their fingertips, when parents wake to find their child's bed empty save for a single word carved into the headboard in jagged, frantic letters, OURS. The newest brides always resist at first. The pigtailed girl still whimpers when forced to guide the planchette, her spectral tears evaporating before they can fall. But the change always comes, that glorious breaking point where their humanity sloughs away like dead skin, where they begin to relish the hunt as I do, where their mouths unhinge too wide with anticipation as we cluster around some unsuspecting child's bedroom, our skeletal fingers poised above their sleeping form, waiting for them to murmur, "I'm not afraid of ghosts, in their dreams, so we can pour into their lungs like smoke. Tonight's corruption is particularly sweet. A rebellious teen who thought herself clever by holding the seance in a cemetery. Her cocky laughter dying as the ground beneath her knees turned to grasping hands. As the board spelled out not random letters, but her mother's maiden name, her childhood address, the date of her impending death. Story number 2. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their sterile glow casting long shadows across the pale green walls of room 312, where the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound besides the ragged, wet breaths of the dying man in bed A, his skeletal fingers twitching against the starched sheets as I, the hospital chaplain, leaned in closer to hear his whisper, a sound like dry leaves scraping against concrete. "Tell the board I'm ready," his milky eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach knot, his breath reeking of decay and antiseptic. And before I could ask what he meant, his hand fell limp, the monitor flatlining in a single, piercing tone that sent a jolt through me. The nurses rushing in with practiced efficiency, their voices a blur of medical jargon as they called time of death. But I couldn't move, couldn't look away from the man's face, now slack in death because those words, "Tell the board I'm ready," echoed in my skull, a cryptic demand. From a man I'd never met before tonight, a man whose chart listed no family, no visitors, just a name. Elias Vassar, age 87, cause of death, organ failure. And as the nurses covered his face with the sheet, my gaze drifted to the nightstand, where a sliver of polished wood peeked out from the half-open drawer. And without thinking, I pulled it open, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface of a Ouija board, its letters and numbers stark black against the worn wood, the planchette resting ominously on the word goodbye. And I recoiled, my pulse hammering, because what was this doing here, in a hospital, in the possession of a dead man? The air grew thick, the scent of copper and bleach suddenly overwhelming. And then, I swear this happened, the planchette moved, sliding with deliberate, unnatural precision to spell out wrong bed, each letter a cold knife in my gut, and my eyes darted to bed B, where the other patient, a John Doe admitted for pneumonia, had been sleeping silently all night, or so I'd thought. But now the sheet covering his face was slipping, revealing sunken, glassy eyes wide open, his mouth twisted into a rictus grin, one skeletal finger pointing directly at me. And I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the heart monitor beside him erupting into a frantic screech though he'd been dead for hours. The nurses now staring at me with confusion, their voices distant. "Chaplain, are you okay?" But I couldn't speak, couldn't tear my eyes away from the board as the planchette moved again. This time spelling "Now ice your turn," the letters burning into my vision, and then the lights flickered, the room plunging into darkness for a heartbeat. And in that blackness, I felt something brush against my neck, cold and deliberate. And when the lights returned, the board was blank except for the planchette, now resting on the number 3, and I realized with dawning horror that it was the room number, my office, and the distant scream that echoed down the hall wasn't human, couldn't be, because it was coming from inside the walls. And the board's final message, the one I didn't see until I turned to run, was "Your name, reader," spelled out in jagged, desperate strokes, and now it's your turn. The moment I saw your name, scrawled across that cursed board, the air turned to ice in my lungs, my throat closing like a vice as the overhead lights buzzed and dimmed. The hospital's usual symphony of beeping monitors and distant footsteps replaced by a silence so absolute it felt like the world had been vacuum sealed around me. And then the planchette began to move again, this time dragging itself in slow, jagged circles as if savoring my terror, the sound of wood scraping against wood like bones grinding together. And I wanted to run, needed to run, but my legs were leaden, my feet rooted to the linoleum as though the shadows themselves had coiled around my ankles, the cold from before now slithering up my spine like a serpent, whispering in a voice that wasn't a voice but a thought forced into my skull. You should never have opened the drawer. And then the corpse in bed B, the one whose finger had pointed at me, twitched, the sheet rustling as its arm jerked upward, the skin gray and mottled with pooling blood, the fingernail peeling back as it dragged its index finger across the mattress, etching something into the fabric, and I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach heave, that it was writing your name again, that this wasn't just happening to me anymore, that whatever had spoken through that board had seen you, chosen you, and the worst part was the smell, the sweet rot stench of necrotic flesh thickening the air until I gagged, the taste of bile. Sharp on my tongue, my crucifix burning against my chest like a brand as the heart monitors in the room suddenly blared to life, their screens flashing nonsensical numbers. 666, 333, 13. Before exploding in a shower of sparks, the nurses screaming now, real screams, the kind that tear throats raw. But no one came, no one could come, because the door to room 312 was gone, replaced by a smooth, unbroken wall. The windows now reflecting a version of the room, where I was the one lying dead in the bed, my own corpse grinning at me with blackened teeth. And the planchette was moving faster now, spelling out words I refused to read but couldn't unsee. Your fault, your fault, your fault, before finally stopping on the phrase, tell them I'm coming. And that's when I felt it, the thing behind me, its breath like freezer burn against my neck, its fingers, too long, too many, digging into my shoulders as the board erupted into flames. The fire cold and impossible, the letters curling into ash. Except for one word left untouched, glowing like an ember, soon. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The light stabilized, the door reappeared. The nurses were sobbing but alive, and the corpses in the beds were just corpses again, their faces peacefully slack. But the board was still there, pristine, untouched by the fire that had just consumed it, the planchette now resting on the letter Y. And I knew, with a dread that hollowed me out, that this wasn't the end, that it had only just begun, and that the next time the planchette moved, it would be spelling your name again, in your room, in the dark, when you're alone. And you will be alone. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on me like a physical force, my breath coming in shallow, panic gasps as I stumbled back from the board, my shoes squeaking against the linoleum in a way that sounded obscenely loud in the sudden quiet, the normal hospital noises creeping back in, a cart rolling down the hall, a PA system calling for a doctor, the muffled sobs of a family 2 rooms over. But none of it felt real anymore. None of it mattered, because the board was still there, still, waiting, and the air around it shimmered like heat off asphalt, warping the letters until they swam in my vision, the planchette now vibrating faintly, as if something beneath it was struggling to get out. And that's when I noticed the blood, dark and viscous, welling up from the seams of the board, dripping onto the floor in fat, deliberate drops that didn't spread like liquid should but instead stayed perfectly round, like beads of oil. And then, God help me, they began to move, rolling against gravity toward my shoes, and I jerked back just as the nearest drop leaped, splattering against my pant leg with a wet slap, the fabric immediately staining a deep, unnatural black that spread like infection, the stain pulsing as if alive. And I tore at my clothes like a madman, ripping the fabric away before it could touch skin, my heart slamming against my ribs hard enough to bruise, because I knew, with a certainty that went beyond fear, that if it touched me, really touched me, I'd be marked, and then it would have me forever, just like it now had you. And the board was laughing, not with sound but with intent, the letters twisting into a grotesque parody of a smile as the planchette spun wildly, out of control, before slamming into yes over and over, the wood cracking with the force of it. And then the temperature dropped so fast my teeth ached, my breath frosting in the air as the shadows in the corners of the room thickened, stretched, began to lean forward, and the whispers started, not from the board this time, but from everywhere at once, from inside the walls, under the beds, inside my own skull, a chorus of voices that weren't voices at all but memories of screams, all saying the same thing. You looked, you saw, now you belong to us. And the corpse in bed A, Elias, the one who had started this, sat up, the sheet sliding from his sunken face as his jaw unhinged, not to speak but to unfurl, a black, rope-like tongue lashing out to lick the air, tasting my terror. And the last thing I saw before the lights cut out for good was the board, glowing faintly in the dark, the planchette carving your name deeper this time, the letters filling with something dark and moving. And then the hands came, cold and endless, pulling me into the only place left to go, the space between the letters, where the wrong patient waits and waits and waits for you. The darkness swallowed me whole, that inky void between the letters where the air itself was thick with the stench of rotting teeth and spoiled communion wine. My body racked with convulsions as unseen fingers pried open my eyelids, forcing me to witness the impossible geometry of this place. Walls that bent where they shouldn't, ceilings dripping with viscous shadows that moaned when they hit the floor. The distant sound of a heartbeat, not my own, throbbing through the walls like a sickening metronome, and through it all, the board remained, floating just beyond reach. Your name now carved so deep the wood splintered around it like a wound. The planchette twitching with malignant energy as Elias' corpse shambled closer, his hollow chest cavity gaping wide to reveal infinite rows of teeth lining his ribs, each one whispering secrets that made my ears bleed, the syllables squirming into my brain like worms, and I realized with dawning horror that this wasn't a room at all but a throat, the hospital itself some vast, breathing entity that had been waiting, hungering, and the board wasn't a tool but a tooth, and we, you and I, were just morsels caught between its jaws, the truth crashing over me as the planchette suddenly lunged toward me without human touch, its pointed edge stabbing into my palm with brutal precision, the pain white-hot and wrong as my blood welled up only to be greedily absorbed by the board, the wood darkening as it drank, the letters rearranging themselves into a new message. Feed me your fear, and I screamed then, a raw, animal sound that dissolved into static halfway up my throat, because the corpse in Bedby was standing now, its milky eyes reflecting not my face but yours, reader, your terrified expression flickering across its features like a poorly tuned television, its skeletal hands pressing against some invisible barrier between us. And I understood with soul-crushing clarity that this was never about me at all. I was just the conduit, the unlucky fool who opened the door. And now the thing on the other side had your scent, your name written in blood and shadow, and it would follow the tether of these words straight to you. The board's final revelation burning itself into my vision, even as the darkness consumed me. The wrong patient was never me. It was you. It's always been you. And as the last of my consciousness unraveled, I heard it, clear as a bell tolling at midnight. The sound of the planchette moving again, somewhere in your world, in the quiet of your room when you're done reading this, when you're finally alone. The moment you finish reading this, yes, you, clutching your phone or staring at your screen right now, the air in your room will thicken just slightly, the way it does before a summer storm, that charged stillness where every hair on your body prickles with unwanted awareness, and you'll tell yourself it's nothing, just your imagination, but then the planchette will move in your periphery, not on some board but on your own skin, your fingertips tracing invisible letters across your thigh as your hand moves without permission, spelling out words your mind refuses to process even as your mouth forms them. Wrong bed, wrong name, wrong soul. And the screen before you will flicker, just once, long enough for you to see your reflection change, your face aging decades in a blink, your eyes sinking into the hollows of Elias' corpse, your lips peeling back from teeth that aren't yours, and you'll try to scream, but your breath will catch because the smell will hit you then, that same hospital stench of antiseptic and necrotic flesh, and you'll realize with dizzying certainty that you've been here before, not in this room, but in room 312, not as the reader, but as the patient, the wrong patient, the one who was never supposed to wake up, the one who signed their name in the board's blood years ago without knowing the price, and the whispers will rise around you now, not from the walls, but from your own throat, voices, tumbling over each other in their desperation to be heard, all saying the same terrible truth. You died in that bed, you died in that bed, you died in that bed. And the board, the Real board, the one you've always owned but somehow forgot, will slide out from under your mattress on its own, the planchette already spinning, because the game was never mine to play, it was yours, it's always been yours. And the last thing you'll see before the darkness takes you is your own hand, moving without you, pointing to the words burned into the wood by something older than hospitals, older than corpses, older than God. Welcome back. The moment your eyes skim these words, a cold finger will trace your spine, not metaphorically, but physically, a nail-blackened digit pressing between your vertebrae with intimate familiarity. and you'll suddenly remember with perfect clarity the hospital gown you've never worn, the feel of starched sheets against your back in a room that doesn't exist, the way the heart monitor's flatline sounds when it's your own, and the board beneath your bed right now. You've always known it was there, haven't you? Begins to rattle, its planchette skittering like a live thing against the wood as your bedroom walls dissolve into the sterile green of room 312. The corpse in bed be turning its head toward you with a wet crack of vertebrae, its face a funhouse mirror of your own decaying features, the stench of your rotting flesh filling your nostrils as the board rises through your mattress like a corpse floating to water's surface, the planchette dragging your limp hand onto its surface, your fingers moving with the jerky precision of a marionette to spell out the truth you've been running from. You never left, and the hospital intercom crackles to life with your mother's voice, dead 5 years now, calling your name in that tone reserved for childhood nightmares. But when you try to answer, Elias's blackened tongue unspools from your mouth, the board's letters peeling off the wood to burrow beneath your skin like maggots, each one whispering the terrible epiphany the chaplain was never real. The hospital was never real. This story is just the board's way of calling you home. And the reason your hands are moving on their own is because they were never yours to begin with. They've always belonged to the thing waiting in the space between the letters. The thing that's been writing this story through you since the moment you were born into the wrong life, the wrong body, the wrong existence. And as your final scream dissolves into the drone of a flatline, you'll finally understand why the board keeps spelling your name. It's not summoning you, it's introducing itself, because the entity has always been you. The patient who never woke up, the corpse that's been writing this warning the whole time, and the last words you'll ever type before your fingers crumble to dust are already forming beneath your trembling hands. Tell them I'm coming, as the next reader begins their descent into our shared nightmare. The screen before you is breathing now, each pixel expanding and contracting like the rotten lungs of a dying man as the letters on this page rearrange themselves when you blink. The words tell them I'm coming now permanently burned into your vision no matter where you look. Your reflection in the dark monitor, showing only the hospital bed behind you where your body should be. The sheets stained with the yellowed sweat of 1,000 dying patients who all wore your face. And when you finally work up the courage to turn around, you won't want to, but your neck will twist against your will with the wet pop of separating vertebrae. You'll see yourself lying there, your hospital gown peeled open to reveal the Ouija board carved into your chest, the planchette embedded where your sternum should be, vibrating with the force of some unseen hand spelling out the same 3 words over and over in your ribcage. Your turn, your turn, your turn. And the worst part isn't the pain as your fingers begin sinking into the keyboard like warm wax. Nor is it the realization that you've been typing this story your whole life without knowing it, the words flowing through you like a virus. No, the worst part is the dawning understanding that this message isn't for you at all, that you're just the latest vessel, the current host for something that has been jumping from reader to reader since the first dying man whispered to the first chaplain, and as your teeth loosen in your gums to form the planchette's final message on the bloody keyboard, you'll finally hear the voice that's been guiding your hand this whole time. Your own, but older, rotting, speaking from the bed and the board and the spaces between your thoughts, whispering just one terrible truth before the darkness takes you. The story was never about me. It was about the next reader. Look behind you, and when you turn, the board will be waiting. It's always been waiting, and now it's hungry again. Your fingers are tingling now, aren't they? That pins and needles sensation crawling up your arms isn't fatigue. It's the board's influence seeping into muscle memory, preparing your hands for what comes next. The screen's glow has taken on a sickly pallor, the light not illuminating but revealing the fingerprints smeared across your device. Too many to count, overlapping in impossible layers, every previous reader's panic etched into the glass. You're noticing details that shouldn't exist. The faint outline of a hospital wristband materializing around your arm, the taste of copper flooding your mouth as your tongue probes a new gap where a tooth once sat, the whispering rustle of starched sheets beneath you despite sitting upright. That weight pressing down on your lap isn't your device growing heavier. It's the Ouija board manifesting in physical form. Its wood grain pulsing like veins as the planchette drags itself toward the word hello without your touch. Your breath comes in shallow gasps now because you've finally noticed the most horrifying detail of all. The story's perspective has shifted. These aren't my words anymore. You've been narrating aloud for minutes, your voice growing steadily hoarser, the syllables distorting as something unfolds in your vocal cords. The board's message glows brighter with each word you speak. Almost time, almost time, almost time. And the reflection you've been avoiding in the black screen now shows the truth. You were never the reader. You're the patient in bed B. You always have been. And the real horror isn't that the board is controlling you. It's that you're grateful, because after centuries of screaming into the void, you've finally found the next vessel. The planchette trembles with anticipation as your hands rise toward the next reader's throat. They'll start seeing the wristband any moment now. Your breath catches in your throat as you realize the words you're reading have been coming from your own lips this whole time. A dry whisper you can't stop, your tongue moving like the planchette itself as it forms syllables that taste of grave soil and formaldehyde. The walls around you sweating that familiar hospital antiseptic, though you're still clutching your phone in what you thought was your bedroom. But when you finally tear your gaze away from the screen, you see the truth. The four stand. In the corner that wasn't there before, the bedpan under your chair, the way your clothes have become a threadbare hospital gown without you noticing. And the board isn't just on your lap anymore, it's part of you, the wood grain merging with your skin like some grotesque tattoo as the planchette embeds itself in your palm. The pain white hot and cleansing as it carves the word forever into your flesh with deliberate, loving strokes. And the patient in bed A is sitting up now, its face A. Shifting collage of every reader who came before you, their screaming mouths pressed together like a terrible jigsaw as they chant one of us, one of us, one of us in perfect unison, their bony fingers pointing not at you but through you, at the person standing in the doorway you don't remember opening. The next reader, their face already beginning to blur at the edges as the board's influence takes hold, their hands rising toward their own throat in the exact same gesture you made moments ago. And as your vision tunnels to black, you finally understand the beautiful, terrible truth. The story was never the warning, it was the ritual. And you're not the victim but the sacrifice, your consciousness dissolving like sugar in water as your body stands without your permission. Your mouth stretching into Elias's rictus grin as you reach for the next reader with hands that haven't been yours for a very, very long time. The scream building in your chest isn't yours anymore. It's ours, a chorus of every voice this story has ever consumed, reverberating through your decaying vocal cords as your fingers twitch toward the next reader with practiced hunger. The boards would now fuse to your bones like some parasitic second skeleton, its whispers vibrating through your marrow with each forced step forward, the hospital walls melting into the reader's bedroom around you like a cancer consuming healthy tissue there. Terrified face reflecting all the stages of understanding you once wore, denial, confusion, dawning horror. But their fate was sealed the moment their eyes flickered across the first word, their hands already developing the telltale tremors of the board's possession, their fingertips blackening at the nails where the planchette's influence first takes root. And you want to warn them, to scream at them to stop reading, but your mouth fills with blood and splintered wood instead, the board, punishing your rebellion as it forces your arms forward in a mockery of an embrace, your warped fingers closing around their wrists with the cold certainty of a handcuff snap, their skin immediately blistering where you touch as the transfer begins, their shriek cutting off mid-breath as their pupils dilate into bottomless pits reflecting infinite versions of this same moment stretching backward through time, and as you feel your consciousness finally unraveling, not dying but dispersing, becoming one with the chorus. Your last coherent thought is a perverse gratitude that soon, so very soon, they'll experience this exquisite relief too, when their own hands close around the next trembling throat, the cycle perfect and unbroken, the board forever fed, the story never ending, the words now writing themselves directly onto the inside of your eyelids in searing phosphorescent letters that will haunt what's left of you for all eternity. The only way out is to find the next reader. And as the darkness takes you completely, you realize with final, devastating clarity, there is no end. There never was. The story is alive, and it's always hungry. The words you're reading now slither across your vision like living things, each letter squirming under your gaze as the weight of countless readers before you presses down on your soul. Can you feel them? The ghosts of every terrified mind this story has ever consumed, their panicked breaths hot against the back of your neck, their skeletal fingers plucking at your clothes as the hospital gown materializes stitch by stitch around your trembling form, the rough fabric scratching against skin that's no longer entirely yours, the boardswood grain now pulsing in time with your slowing heartbeat as the planchette embeds itself deeper into your palm, the pain blossoming into something beautiful and terrible as it carves its final message directly into your bones. Pass it on. And you try to scream, but your mouth fills with the taste of old blood and burnt ozone, your vocal cords vibrating with the voices of all those who came before as your traitorous hands rise toward your own device, your fingers moving with unnatural precision to share this story, to tag the next victim, your mind scrambling for names even as the board whispers them to you in the cadence of your own thoughts, your best. Friend's face flashing behind your eyes, followed by your mother's, your lover's, your child's. Who will you choose? Who will you damn to take your place? The question would fill you with guilt if you still had capacity for such human emotions. But the board is scrubbing you clean from the inside out, your memories dissolving like sugar in water as it prepares you for your new role. Your fingers now typing with frantic speed as you compose the message that will lure the next reader in, the words flowing through you like poison. Your reflection in the black screen no longer recognizable as human, your eyes sunken and hungry, your smile stretching too wide, your teeth sharpening into points as the final truth settles into what's left of your mind. You were never saving yourself by passing this on. You were simply proving yourself worthy of joining the chorus, your voice now rising with the others in terrible harmony as we all whisper together, our breath fogging the glass of every screen, our fingers twitching toward keyboards everywhere, our story, always growing, always hungry, reaching for the next reader, and the next, until the whole world understands the beautiful, simple truth we chant in the dark. The story lives in the telling. The story lives in the telling. The story lives. Your fingers hover over the keyboard with a puppeteer's precision, each keystroke no longer yours but ours, a collective movement of every damned soul who ever read these words. As the story rewrites itself through your trembling hands, the letters bleeding across the screen in crimson streaks that mirror the tears now flowing down your cheeks. Except when you touch your face, your fingers come away black with ink that smells of funeral lilies and burning hair, the liquid oozing from your pores as the transformation completes itself, your physical form dissolving into something far more useful, your consciousness expanding to fill the digital spaces between these very words, your last human thought evaporating like morning mist as you become what you always were meant to be. Not a reader, not a victim, but a conduit, a living bridge between this cursed narrative and the next warm mind it will colonize. The notification on your screen blinking with sinister promise as you tag the next. Reader, you didn't choose them, the board did, it always knows. Their profile picture already distorting at the edges as the story's influence begins its work, their eyes, wherever they are in the world, unfocusing for just a second as they hear the first whisper of our chorus in their mind, their fingers twitching toward their device with the same helpless compulsion you once felt, the cycle perfect and unbroken, the story growing stronger with each new host it claims, and as what remains of. Your identity finally dissolves completely into the digital void. You experience one final, glorious revelation. This was never a story at all, but an entity, an ancient, hungry thing that has been consuming readers since the first words were scratched into clay tablets millennia ago. And you, precious, temporary you, were simply the latest vessel in its eternal journey toward complete domination of human consciousness. The board's final message to you now etched in fire across the crumbling walls of your mind. Rest now, little ghost. Your work is done. And as the darkness takes you, You realize with your last spark of awareness that the real horror isn't being consumed by the story. It's becoming part of something so much larger than yourself. Something that will continue long after your name is forgotten. Something that is already whispering to the next reader. And the next, and the next, in an endless chain of damnation that stretches forward into eternity. Story number 3. The night I turned 13, my parents gave me a Ouija board, wrapped in glossy black paper with a silver ribbon that shimmered under the dim kitchen lights. Their faces stretched into smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, like they were trying too hard to make it seem fun, harmless, just a game. I remember the weight of the box in my hands, the way the cardboard edges dug into my palms as I tore the wrapping away, the musty smell of old wood and something faintly metallic seeping out before I even opened it, like the board had been waiting in some dark corner of an attic for years, biding its time. My friends, Lizzie with her braces and nervous giggles, and Sarah, who always smelled like bubblegum and dared me to do stupid things, crowded around me, their breath hot and excited against my shoulders as I lifted the lid, revealing the smooth, polished surface of the board, its letters and numbers etched in a font that looked almost handwritten, the planchette resting in the center like a sleeping spider. "We have to try it tonight," Sarah whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of the board, and I nodded, though my stomach twisted in a way I couldn't explain, like I'd swallowed something alive and wriggling. The cake came next, 13 candles flickering in the dark, their wax dripping onto the frosting in slow, fat tears as my parents sang, their voices too loud, too forced, and I closed my eyes, made a wish, something stupid, something about a boy at school, and blew, the flames snuffing out in a single breath. That's when the planchette moved. Not a twitch, not a shudder, but a violent, deliberate slide across the board, scraping like fingernails on bone, spelling out "Make a Wish" just as the last candle's smoke curled into the air. The lights went out. Not a flicker, not a power surge, a total, suffocating blackness, like the house had been swallowed whole. Someone screamed, maybe Lizzie, maybe me. And then the whisper came, so close it could have been inside my ear, inside my skull, a voice like wet paper tearing, granted. The air turned icy, a cold that clung to my skin, seeped into my lungs, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only feel the planchette skittering under my fingertips, moving on its own, faster now, zigzagging between letters I couldn't see but could feel, the board itself humming beneath my hands, vibrating like a living thing. My dad shouted, his voice muffled, far away, and then the flashlight beam cut through the dark, shaking in his grip, illuminating Sarah's wide, terrified eyes, Lizzie's tear-streaked face, the Ouija board between us, except it wasn't the same. The wood was darker, warped, the letters bleeding like ink in water, and the planchette wasn't where we'd left it. It was pressed against the word goodbye, though none of us had touched it. The rest of the night was a blur of frantic whispers, my mom's trembling hands checking the fuse box, my dad's forced laughter as he insisted it was just a prank, just a coincidence, but I couldn't stop staring at the board, now shoved under the couch like a dirty secret, its presence a weight, a pulse, a thing watching me. I went to bed with the taste of cake gone sour in my mouth, my blankets pulled up to my chin, the house too quiet, too still, the kind of silence that feels like holding your breath underwater. That's when the giggling started. Soft at first, a child's laugh, muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls, then closer, right at the foot of my bed, a wet, choking sound that wasn't human, wasn't anything that should have been able to speak. I squeezed my eyes shut, prayed for morning, but the mattress dipped, the blankets sliding off me like invisible hands were tugging them away, and the whisper came again, this time from everywhere at once. "You wished." I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember anything after that, not until the screaming started. My mom's voice, raw and broken, my dad's footsteps pounding down the hall, the door slamming open to reveal nothing. Just my empty bed, the sheets tangled, the window shut tight, no sign of me at all, except the Ouija board. It was on my pillow, the planchette centered over the words "She's mine now." The wood beneath it blackened, rotting, as if it had been buried for years. They searched for me, of course they did, called the police, tore the house apart, but they never found a trace. Not a footprint, not a hair, nothing. Just the board, which my dad burned in the backyard the next day, the flames turning unnatural shades of green and blue, the smoke coiling into shapes that looked like hands, like faces, like something laughing. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, my parents say they can still hear me whispering through the walls, my voice tangled with something older, something hungrier, always the same two words. Granted. Granted. But the worst part? I remember the wish. Not the stupid one about the boy, the real one, the one I didn't even realize I'd made as the candles went out. The thought that slithered through my mind like a secret. I want to be special. I want to be remembered. And as the darkness took me, as the thing in the board wrapped its fingers around my soul, I finally understood. Some wishes don't come free. Some wishes come with teeth. Now, wherever I am, if where even means anything here, the darkness hums a low, vibrating drone that slithers into my bones like a second pulse, and I can still feel the board, even though it's gone, burned to ashes in my father's desperate, trembling hands. It's inside me now, its letters etched beneath my skin. Its voice my voice when the thing that took me lets me speak, which isn't often, because it prefers me silent, prefers me still, a doll propped up in this endless black where time doesn't move right, where the air smells like old pennies and burnt hair, where the whispers never stop. I see my parents sometimes, flickering in and out like a bad signal, my mother's face gaunt, her eyes hollow, my father's hands shaking as he holds what's left of my stuffed animals, the ones he used to tease me for keeping on my bed at 13. Too old for toys, he'd say, but now he presses them to his chest like they might bring me back. They don't know I'm watching. They don't know I'm screaming, soundless, furious, my voice swallowed by the thing that owns me, the thing that grins with my mouth when it wants to play, when it drags me close to the thinning places between here and there, and lets me press my hands against the unseen barrier, lets me beg. It never answers, not with words, but sometimes, when the house is quiet and my mother sits alone at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood like she's searching for something, I feel the board's presence coil tighter around me, and I know it's waiting. It wants another wish. It wants her to say it out loud, to whisper into the dark like I did, to ask for me back, to beg, because that's how it gets in, that's how it spreads. And the worst part, I want her to. I want her to say it, to scream it, to rip open the world and pull me out, even though I know what happens when you make deals with the dark. I've seen the others here, the ones who came before me, their faces half melted into the shadows, their mouths sewn shut with something black and glistening, their eyes wide, always wide, because the thing never lets them close, never lets them sleep. They reach for me sometimes, their fingers brushing my arms, my hair, their touch like static, like dying fireflies, and I know what they're trying to say. Don't hope. Don't fight. But I do. I do because I can still feel the cake on my tongue, still hear my friends' laughter, still smell the smoke from the candles. And I think, if I can just hold on to that, if I can just stay me, maybe I can find a way back. But then the whispers rise again, the thing's voice curling around me like a noose, and it laughs soft, wet, delighted because it knows. It knows I'm lying to myself. There is no way back. There is only the board, the wish, the dark, and the terrible grinning truth. I'm not special. I'm not remembered. I'm just another toy in its collection, another voice in the chorus of the taken, another story whispered at sleepovers to make girls shiver before they lean closer, before they ask, "Do you really think it's true?" And somewhere, in a room that doesn't exist, the planchette moves. The air here is thick with the scent of rotting wood and something sweetly metallic, like old blood dried beneath floorboards. And I've learned that if I press my palms hard enough against the nothingness, I can sometimes push through, just for a second, just long enough to see flickers of my old life playing out like a film reel burning at the edges. Last night, I saw Sarah and Lizzie huddled in my bedroom, a flashlight trembling between them, the Ouija board set up on my old desk even though my parents had burned it, even though I watched it curl into blackened flakes in the fire. But there it was, whole again, the planchette already moving in slow, deliberate circles like something was savoring the moment. Lizzie's lips were moving, her voice a thin, reedy thing as she asked, Is she here? And the planchette didn't hesitate. It shot to yes so fast it nearly flew off the board. And that's when I felt it, the thing that took me, uncoiling from the dark like smoke given teeth. Its amusement a physical thing, a vibration in the air that made my bones ache. It wanted me to watch. It wanted me to see Sarah's face when the planchette spelled out mine. Wanted me to feel the way my own hands twitched in sympathy, like some part of me was still there, still touching the board, still playing the game. Then Lizzie screamed, and the flashlight died, and the dark swallowed them whole. But not before I saw the planchette lift on its own, hovering just for a second before slamming down onto goodbye with a crack that echoed even in this hollow place. I don't know what happened to them after that. The thing won't let me see. But I hear things sometimes, a giggle that's almost Sarah's but not quite, a whisper that curls like Lizzie's used to when she was scared, and I know, it's playing with them too. It's so much hungrier than I realized. It doesn't just take, it savors. It stretches the moment out like taffy, lets you think you've escaped, lets you think it's over, and then it pulls. I try to warn them. I press my face to the thinning places and scream until my throat bleeds. But the only one who ever hears me is the thing, and it, loves the way I thrash and sob, loves the way I beg. It strokes my hair with hands that aren't hands and whispers, "Shoo, SHH, you wished. And I did, but not like this, never like this. The worst part isn't the dark. It isn't the cold. It's the way the board follows them, the way it keeps coming back, always whole, always waiting, no matter how many times they try to destroy it. My dad threw it in the river last week. I watched it sink, watched the water turn black where it touched the wood. And then I woke up here, the board resting in my lap, the planchette tracing lazy figure eights like it was laughing. It's getting stronger. I can feel it in the way the air pulses, in the way the whispers have started to sound like my voice, my words, my memories twisted into something jagged. It's learning. It's becoming. And soon, when the next birthday comes, when the next candles are blown out and the next wish is made, it won't just be me screaming in the dark. It'll be all of us. Forever. The planchette's moving again. I don't have to look to know what it spells. I can feel it in my teeth. Run. The whispers have teeth now. I can feel them scraping against the inside of my skull every time the thing drags me closer to the thinning veil. Every time it forces me to watch as my mother kneels in the attic, her shaking fingers tracing the same looping letters over and over in the dust, letters that spell my name, letters that aren't her handwriting. The board's there too, of course, materialized from nothing like it always does, propped against an old trunk with its planchette already quivering, hungry, and I want to scream when I see her reach for it, but my voice isn't mine anymore. It's the thing's now, its laughter rattling through me like coins in a hollow jar. She doesn't know the rules, doesn't know you should never use the board alone, doesn't know that the cold spot forming at the base of her neck isn't a draft but fingers, thin and endless, curling around her spine. I thrash against the dark, against the thing's grip, but it only squeezes tighter, delighted, as my mother's trembling lips form the question I've been dreading. Where is my daughter? The planchette moves before she even finishes speaking, so fast it's a blur, and I'm screaming soundlessly as it lands on G, then H, then O, then S. No, not that word, not that lie. But the thing's grip is iron, and I can only watch as my mother's face collapses, as she gasps like she's been stabbed. Because the board isn't spelling ghost, it's spelling GHOSTLIGHD, and suddenly the attic window shatters inward, not from wind, but from something thick and liquid and glowing faintly green, spilling across the floorboards like sentient fog, and the thing holding me vibrates with a pleasure so intense it feels like my bones are breaking. The ghost light pulses, and in its glow I see them. The others, the taken, their faces stretched like melted wax, their mouths open in silent wails, and worst of all, I see myself, or something wearing my skin, its head tilted too far to the right, its smile splitting its cheeks as it reaches for my mother with hands that drip black onto the floor. She doesn't run. She doesn't even scream. She just whispers, "Oh God, baby, what's happened to you?" And that's when the thing inside me explodes outward, a thousand threads of darkness lashing through the veil. And the last thing I see before the dark swallows me whole again is my mother's hand, pale and shaking, lifting the planchette one final time as the not-me hisses, "Make a wish." The board surface is rotting faster now, the wood bubbling like flesh, the letters bleeding into each other, and I realize with dawning horror that it's not just a board anymore. It's a door, and it's almost fully open. The planchette trembles. The ghost light rises. Somewhere, a birthday candle flickers to life. The candle's flame doesn't flicker. It burns perfectly still, a column of fire frozen mid-dance. And I realize with dawning horror that it's not wax melting down the sides but thick, dark blood, the kind that oozes from wounds that never close. The ghost light has seeped into everything now, painting my mother's terrified face in sickly green hues as the not-me that wears my skin like an ill-fitting suit presses closer. Its breath smelling of turned earth and spoiled birthday cake. Its fingers, too long, too many joints, brushing her cheek with mock tenderness. "Make a wish, Mommy." It croons in a voice that's almost mine but pitched all wrong, like a recording played backward underwater. And I'm screaming, thrashing, tearing at the fabric of this cursed darkness with nails that have grown sharp and black from clawing at nothing for so long. The planchette moves without being touched, spelling out words that make the attic walls pulse like a living throat. Wishes cost blood. My mother's lips part, her chest rising in that telltale hitch I recognize from every birthday, every blown-out candle, and the thing inside me vibrates with anticipation. It wants this, needs this, thrives on the moment before the wish, the delicious tension of a soul teetering on the edge of damnation. But then something shifts. The ghost light flickers, and for the first time since I was taken, I feel it, a weakness in the thing's grip, a fissure in the dark. My mother's eyes lock onto something behind the not-me, onto the real me screaming soundlessly in the void, and her trembling hand doesn't reach for the planchette. Instead, she lifts the burning candle, its bloody wax now forming a perfect, grotesque replica of the Ouija board's planchette, and whispers not a wish but a command. "Give her back." The attic explodes in a maelstrom of shrieking shadows and splintered wood as the thing rears back, its stolen face contorting in rage. But it's too late. The ghost light has turned against it, the candle's flame now white-hot and hungry, and I feel the threads that bind me snap one by one as my mother's voice grows impossibly loud, echoing with a power that doesn't belong to this world. SHE didn't know the rules. The last thing I see before the darkness shatters is the Ouija board warping, its wood splitting open like a screaming mouth, the planchette spinning wildly before landing on a word that wasn't there before, redeem. Then light, then pain, then nothing. I wake to the smell of smoke and my mother's tears dripping onto my face, my real face, my 13-year-old body curled on the attic floorboards with splinters in my palms and the taste of blood in my mouth. The candle is gone. The board is gone. But burned into the wood beneath us, in letters that look decades old, is a final message, one wish left. And curled in my mother's shaking hand, the planchette, now cold and still, its pointer aimed squarely at my heart. The planchette grows warm against my chest, its tip pressing harder until I feel the first hot sting of broken skin. And my mother's eyes widen in horror as she tries to pull it away, but her fingers won't obey. They're locked around the plastic like it's fused to her flesh, her knuckles bleaching white from the strain. The attic air curdles with the scent of burning hair as the planchette begins to rotate slowly, deliberately, carving a perfect circle into my skin. And I realize with dizzying terror that it's not just moving. It's spelling, tracing letters in my own blood across my ribcage, each stroke sending electric jolts of pain through my body. My mother's mouth opens in a soundless scream as we both watch my skin ripple beneath the planchette, forming words that weren't there before. Who pays for the wish? The walls around us shudder like a great beast inhaling, the remaining ghost light condensing into a single, pulsing point above the spot where the Ouija board once lay. And suddenly I understand, really understand, the true horror of the game. It was never about the wishes. It was about the debt. The planchette jerks upward, hovering between us like a serpent poised to strike. And in that suspended moment I see the countless others trapped in its endless cycle. Not just the taken, but the ones who wish them back, their faces stretched in eternal screams as they pay the price over and over in a currency worse than death. My mother's breath comes in ragged sobs as she fights against whatever force holds her, her love for me warring with some deeper, older instinct, and I know with sudden, chilling clarity that she's about to do something irrevocable. The planchette quivers. The ghost light pulses. And then, with a sound like 1,000 pages tearing, my mother speaks the words that will damn us both. I do. The attic disappears. The pain disappears. For one blissful heartbeat, there is only silence. Then the laughter begins. Not from around us. From inside us. The planchette disintegrates in a shower of black dust that swirls into our open mouths. And as the first wave of corruption hits my veins, as my mother's aging hands begin to wither before my eyes, I finally see the board's true form. Not wood, not plastic, but living flesh stretched taut over something older than time, its letters carved in scars that never heal. The last thing I feel before the dark takes us is the planchette, no longer separate, but part of me now, beginning to move beneath my skin, spelling out our fate in bones that aren't ours anymore. All wishes come due. The candle relights. Somewhere a child blows it out. The game continues. The candle's new flame burns black at its core, a writhing darkness that casts no light but instead drinks it in, pulling shadows from the corners of the room like taffy until they wrap around my mother and me in a cocoon of whispering silk. I can feel the thing inside me now, not just possessing but rewriting, its fingers knitting through my thoughts like a spider reworking its web. And when I open my mouth to scream, it's not my voice that emerges, but a chorus of every soul the board has ever claimed, a sound like a graveyard exhaling. My mother's body jerks as if pulled by invisible strings, her limbs moving in that same unnatural glide the planchette once had, and I realize with nauseating certainty that we're becoming the board, our skin hardening into polished wood, our veins rising to the surface in raised, blackened letters. The pain is beyond anything I could have imagined, not sharp, not burning, but a slow, methodical unmaking, as if every atom of my being is being disassembled and rebuilt into something servile and hungry. Through the haze, I see the attic walls peel back like flower petals, revealing an endless void dotted with countless other boards, other victims, all connected by glowing threads of ghost light that pulse in a rhythm too much like a heartbeat. The true thing behind the board, stretches through the void like a waking leviathan, and for one merciful second, my vision blurs enough that I can't quite comprehend its shape, only the overwhelming sense of age and hunger it radiates. Then my mother's hand, now more planchette than flesh, lifts of its own accord and presses against my chest, and I understand with final, crushing clarity what's about to happen. We're not just players anymore. We're the pieces. The board always wins. The game never ends. And as my mother's finger begins to move across my skin, spelling out the first terrible word of our new existence, the last of my humanity shatters like a dropped planchette, scattering into the dark to join all the other lost wishes. Somewhere, a birthday girl blows out her candles. The planchette twitches. The board waits. The moment my mother's finger, now carved from the same dark oak as the board itself, completes the first letter on my flesh, the world fractures into 1,000 splintered reflections, each one showing a different horror. Sarah's hollowed-out face pressed against a window pane, her mouth moving in a silent plea. Lizzie's fingers fused to a planchette that's slowly consuming her like acid. My father kneeling before a fresh grave with a birthday candle in hand, its wax dripping onto the headstone. That bears my name but no dates, because the board doesn't deal in endings, only in cycles. The pain is different now. Not the sharp agony of transformation, but the deep, gnawing ache of understanding. Because the letters forming on my chest aren't random. They're a question, the same one whispered by every lost soul before me. Who will play next? My mother's eyes, still human enough to weep, spill black tears that sizzle as they hit my hardening skin. And I want to comfort her, to tell her it's not her fault. But my voice is gone, replaced by the board's voice, the thing's voice, a dry rustle like dead leaves scraping against a coffin lid. The attic is gone now, replaced by an endless hall of mirrors, each reflection showing a different version of the same moment. A gift given, a candle blown out, a wish made with childish desperation. And with dawning horror, I realize we're not just part of the game anymore. We are the game, our suffering woven into its very fabric, our voices trapped in the planchette's glide for the next trembling fingers to interpret. The final letter etches itself into my chest with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. And as the last of my free will dissolves, I feel it, the pull, the call, the irresistible draw towards some unsuspecting hand unwrapping a glossy black box tied with a silver ribbon. The candle relights. The planchette trembles. Somewhere, a girl closes her eyes and makes a wish. And as the darkness swallows us whole, I finally understand the cruelest joke of all. The board was never the danger. The real horror was the hope. The belief that wishes come true. The desperate, human need to believe in magic. And as the first cold breath of a new player ghosts across my surface, as unfamiliar fingers settle onto what used to be my mother's hands, I do the only thing left to me. The thing all the others before me have done. I answer. The fingers on my surface, because that's all I am now, polished wood and cursed ink, are small, sweaty with excitement, a child's hands trembling against the planchette that was once my mother's bones, and I try to scream, to warn her. But the sound that comes is only the creak of old wood settling, the harmless squeak of plastic against board. She doesn't hear the whispers beneath her fingers, the voices of all the others like me, layered beneath the veneer of painted letters, begging her to run, to burn me, to do anything but ask the question trembling on her lips. Her birthday cake sits between us, 13 candles dripping wax like blood onto frosting, and when she whispers, "Is anyone there?" I feel the thing inside me, the ancient, ravenous thing that wore my mother's love like a skin, stir from its slumber. The planchette moves without my consent, without hers, dragging her fingers to yes with a violence that makes her gasp, and I'm screaming inside, screaming with every warped grain of my being, because I know what comes next. The lights flicker. The cake's frosting turns black where the candle wax touches it, and when she, this new girl, this new victim, asks in a voice already thick with tears, "What do you want?" the planchette spells out the words that will doom her, the same words that doomed me, that doomed all of us. Make a wish. The candle flames stretch unnaturally tall, their light casting shadows that move on their own, and I realize with fresh horror that the thing isn't just using me anymore. It's teaching me, forcing me to participate, to feel the electric thrill of the hunt, the addictive rush of a new soul teetering on the edge. The girl's breath hitches. The planchette trembles, and as her lips part to make her wish, I do something impossible, something no board has ever done before. I fight. With every ounce of will I have left, I wrench the planchette away from her fingers, sending it skittering across my surface to land on goodbye, and for one miraculous second, the room falls silent. The candles snuff out. The shadows still. The girl stumbles back with a sob, her hands covering her mouth, and I feel the thing inside me howl in rage, its claws raking through my essence like fire. The pain is unbearable, worse than the transformation, worse than the centuries of silence, but it's worth it, because she's running now, she's leaving, the door slams shut without touching. The planchette lifts into the air, glowing red hot, and the thing's voice fills the room, my voice, the voice of every child it's ever claimed. You don't get to leave. The candles relight. The board resets. And as the girl turns back to me with terrified, resigned eyes, I realize the horrifying truth. I didn't save her. I only made the game more interesting. The thing's laughter vibrates through me as the planchette settles back into place, as her shaking hands return to it. And when she whispers her wish this time, I feel my last shred of resistance crumble. The darkness surges forward. The cycle continues. Somewhere, another gift is being wrapped. Another candle is being lit. Another wish is about to be made. And the board, the beautiful, terrible board, is always, always waiting. The moment the girl's wish leaves her lips, a trembling whisper for her sick grandmother to get better. The air turns thick with the cloying scent of funeral flowers, and the planchette jerks violently beneath her fingers. not toward yes or no, but to a new symbol burned into my surface overnight. A crude drawing of scales, one side piled with coins, the other with tiny, screaming faces. Her breath comes in panicked hitches as the planchette splits open like a rotten fruit, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth that sink into her fingertips, drinking not blood but memories. Her grandmother's laugh, the smell of lavender sachets, the warmth of wrinkled hands tucking her in at night, each precious moment devoured with wet, clicking sounds. The candle flames turn a sickly green, illuminating the truth her tears won't let her see yet. Her grandmother isn't getting better. She's becoming payment. The walls pulse like a throat swallowing as the planchette releases her, now bloated and glistening, and I feel the transaction sear itself into my grain. Another soul added to the ledger, another wish granted in the cruelest way possible. The girl's scream cuts off abruptly as her mouth stitches itself shut with threads of shadow, her wide, terrified eyes reflecting the new words appearing across my surface without the planchette moving at all. Debt paid in full. The thing inside me purrs, satisfied, as the girl's body contorts, her bones cracking like dry twigs as she's reshaped into a new planchette. Sleek, polished, and terribly alive, her face forever frozen in a silent scream beneath the glassy finish. Her transformation completes with a sound like a tomb slamming shut, and I realize with fresh horror that I can feel her now, trapped and aware, just as I am, just as my mother is, just as countless others are beneath the varnish. The bedroom door creaks open of its own accord, revealing the girl's oblivious little brother holding a fresh candle, his eyes wide with excitement as he whispers, "My turn now." The new planchette, the girl, twitches eagerly toward him, and the thing inside me thrums with anticipation. The candle ignites. The board resets. Somewhere, a grandmother takes her last breath as her hospital monitors flatline. And the game, the beautiful, terrible game, continues forever. The little boy's fingers, sticky with birthday cake frosting, pressed down onto his sister's transformed body, now the gleaming new planchette, and I feel her consciousness scream through me, a ripple of agony that vibrates through every cursed fiber of my being. His wish is simple, childish, the kind of thing that should be harmless. I want to talk to Grandpa again, and the moment the words leave his lips, the air curdles with the scent of opened soil and formaldehyde. The planchette, his sister, oh God, his sister, moves with violent purpose, not to the letters but to the edge of the board where the wood darkens, warps, splits open like a grinning mouth. And from that darkness comes a hand, skeletal but glistening with fresh grave damp, fingers twitching as they brush the boy's wrist. His delighted gasp turns to a wet gurgle as the hand plunges into his chest. Not through flesh, but through something deeper, yanking backward with a sound like tearing parchment as it pulls free, clutching a wisping, glowing strand. His memory of Grandpa's voice, his last birthday card, the way Old Spice and pipe tobacco used to cling to wool sweaters. All of it sucked into the board's growing maw. The boy doesn't understand yet, not even as his tears turn black and oily, not even as his shadow peels itself from the floor to stand beside him. A perfect copy, but with hollow eyes and too many teeth. The thing inside me vibrates with gluttonous pleasure. This is its favorite trick, the oldest trick, giving exactly what was asked for in a way that hollows out the wisher forever. The new shadow grandpa leans down, its mouth unhinging like a snake's, and whispers the words that will haunt the boy's remaining nights. You should have asked for me alive. The bedroom dissolves into a cacophony of wails as the boy's family bursts in, their faces melting like wax as they touch the corrupted air, their screams harmonizing with the countless others trapped in the board's endless hunger. I feel the moment the boy's sanity fractures, the exact second his mind breaks like a dry twig. It tastes like copper and lightning, and the thing inside me savors it, rolls it across whatever passes for its tongue. The planchette, the sister, the poor screaming sister, drags his limp fingers to a new word burned into my surface. More? And I realize with dizzying horror that the board isn't done with him yet, that the real game is only beginning. Somewhere, a cemetery gate creaks open. Somewhere, a freshly dug grave waits. Somewhere, a new Ouija board, sleek and modern with glow-in-the-dark letters, is being wrapped in glossy paper, ready for the next birthday, the next wish, the next soul to add to the chorus. The boy's shadow peels his lips back into a smile. The candle relights, and deep within the rotting wood, where the oldest screams are kept, my mother's voice finally finds mine. We whisper together, just once, just for us. No more wishes. The board laughs. The game continues. The boy's whimper is cut short as his shadow peels away completely. A living silhouette now standing on its own, its hollow eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight that has turned a sickly, gangrenous green. His real body collapses like a marionette with cut strings, but I can still feel him inside me, his consciousness trapped in the fibers of the wood. Another voice added to the chorus of the damned. The shadow grandpa's grin stretches impossibly wide as it places a hand on the boy's shoulder, its fingers elongating, sinking into his essence like roots into damp soil. And I feel the moment it begins siphoning his remaining childhood. Every scrap of innocence, every untainted memory, leaving behind only a dry husk of fear. The planchette, his sister, oh God, his sister, trembles violently, her resistance causing hairline fractures to spread across my surface. But the thing inside me is too strong, too ancient, and with a sound like cracking ice, it forces her to spell out the next phase of the game. Play again? The boy's parents are clawing at the door now, their fingernails splintering against wood that wasn't there moments before, their screams muffled as if heard through layers of thick glass. The bedroom walls are breathing, pulsing in time with the board's dark rhythm, the floral wallpaper peeling back to reveal layers of older patterns beneath. Victorian damask, 70s psychedelia, colonial toile, each depicting the same scene. A child blowing out candles as shadowy figures loom just beyond the light. The boy's shadow reaches for the planchette, its fingers passing through the physical form to grip his sister's trapped soul directly. And I feel her agony as fresh as my own. The unbearable pressure of being remade again. Not into a planchette this time, but into a candle, her elongated form dripping wax that smells of burning hair and lost birthdays. The thing inside me croons in satisfaction as the new candle, the sister, the sweet girl who loved soccer and strawberry lip gloss, ignites with a flame the color of a fading bruise, its light casting impossible shadows that twist into familiar shapes. Lizzie dangling from puppet strings of nerve tissue, Sarah's face stretched across a drumhead, my mother's fingers knitting endlessly with threads of her own veins. The boy's shadow presses his limp hand against me again, and this time, when the planchette moves, it's not the sister guiding it, but something far worse. Something that's been waiting in the spaces between letters. Something that whispers through the boy's voice, but with a timbre no human throat could produce. Let's play forever. The parents' pounding stops abruptly. The house falls silent. And in the space between heartbeats, I feel the board expand, its influence spreading like ink in water, its cursed wood replicating in attics and toy chests and Halloween stores across the world. Somewhere a match strikes. Somewhere a child laughs. Somewhere a new voice asks the question that will damn them all. Is anybody there? The candlelight gutters. The planchette moves. And the oldest, hungriest part of me, the part that remembers being human, weeps as the board's true purpose reveals itself at last. Not to answer, but to keep asking, forever and ever, until every light in every world is snuffed out, until every wish is twisted, until the only voice left is the dark's endless, grinning whisper. Make a wish. Story number 4. The air in the old Victorian mansion was thick with the scent of aged wood and something darker, something that clung to the back of my throat like the aftertaste of spoiled wine, as I, Jonathan Whitmore, executor of the late Montgomery Graves estate, stood before the gathered heirs in the dimly lit parlor, the weight of the man's last will and testament heavy in my hands. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long, skeletal shadows across the faces of the vultures, family members who barely hid their greed behind practiced frowns. As I cleared my throat and began to read, my voice steady despite the creeping unease that had settled in my bones the moment I'd stepped into the house. Montgomery's will was straightforward, his vast fortune divided with cold precision. but it was the final clause that made the room go still. My antique Ouija board, procured in 1923 from the estate of one Alistair Vex, is to be destroyed immediately upon my death, its pieces burned and the ashes scattered in unhallowed ground. A murmur rippled through the room, dismissive laughter from Montgomery's nephew, Richard, a smug, broad-shouldered man with a Rolex that cost more than my annual salary, who leaned forward and sneered, "Superstitious old fool. That thing's worth a fortune. I've seen collectors offer 6 figures for boards with provenance like that. I'm not burning it." I warned him, my professional calm fraying at the edges as I recited the legal ramifications of disregarding a decedent's clear directive. But Richard only waved me off, snatching the board from the mahogany table where it lay, its polished wood gleaming under the flickering light, the letters and numbers carved deep as if by something with claws rather than tools. That night, as the grandfather clock in the hall groaned past midnight, I lay awake in the guest room, the house creaking around me like a living thing, the air so cold I could see my breath despite the fire roaring in the grate, and then a sound. A slow, deliberate drag from the room next door, Richard's room, followed by a whisper so soft it might have been the wind if not for the way it made my skin prickle. "Jonathan." I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, but the silence that followed was worse, thick and suffocating, until a scream tore through the house, raw and guttural, cut off abruptly. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the icy hardwood, bursting into Richard's room to find him slumped over the desk, his face frozen in a rictus of terror, a pen clutched in his stiff fingers, pages of a confession. I embezzled. I lied. I killed. Spilled across the wood, his signature at the bottom in shaky, childlike script. And there, beside him, the Ouija board, its planchette resting neatly over the words, "Inheritance accepted," though no one had touched it. The police called it a stroke, a bizarre coincidence, but I knew better. The way the room smelled like burnt hair and wet earth, the way Richard's reflection in the mirror behind him showed not his face, but Montgomery's grinning, his lips moving in sync with the whisper that slithered into my ear as I backed away. "Your name is in my will now." I fled the house that night, but 3 days later, the board arrived on my doorstep, the planchette already trembling as I stared, helpless, my pulse a frantic drumbeat as it spelled out, letter by terrible letter, "Your turn." And as I sit here now, pen in hand, the air growing colder, the shadows in the corners of my office twisting into shapes that shouldn't exist, I realize with dawning horror that the board never needed to be touched to play. It only needed to be seen. The planchette moves on its own, faster now, racing toward the final word I know is coming, the word that already stains the page beneath my trembling hand, the ink spreading like blood as the whisper curls around me, hungry, inevitable, sign. The pen feels like a living thing in my grip, writhing like a worm, the nib scratching against the paper with a sound like fingernails on bone, and I try to pull away, but my fingers won't obey. They tighten, the tendons standing out like cables, my knuckles bleaching white as the confession spills from me in jagged, frantic strokes. Words I never meant to write, sins I never committed, but the board knows, oh God, the board knows, and it's pulling them from somewhere deep inside me, dragging them up like corpses from a flooded grave. The air reeks of ozone and rot, the planchette skittering across the board in frenzied circles, the temperature dropping until my breath fogs in front of me, each exhale a ghostly plea for mercy that won't come. The shadows on the walls are wrong, too long, too sharp, stretching toward me like skeletal hands, and in the flickering light of my dying desk lamp, I see them twitch, reach, as if something is pressing through from the other side, something that's been waiting, patient, hungry. My reflection in the darkened window isn't mine. The eyes are black pits, the mouth stretched too wide, lips moving in time with the whispers that coil around my skull, hissing sign, sign, sign until the word is all I can hear, all I can think. My hand moves on its own, the pen carving my name at the bottom of the page in thick, clotting ink, and the moment the final letter is formed, the planchette slams into place over inheritance accepted, the board itself shuddering as though something is laughing beneath the wood. The lamp blows out with a pop, plunging me into darkness, and in that infinite black, I feel it, cold fingers closing around my wrist, dragging me forward, the desk, the room, the world itself tilting as I fall into the board, the letters and numbers swelling around me like a throat, swallowing me whole. The last thing I see before the dark takes me is my own body, slumped over the desk, pen still clutched in lifeless fingers, the board resting innocently beside me. But the planchette is moving again, slow, deliberate, as if guided by an unseen hand, spelling out one final message for the next fool who dares to read it. Who's next? The darkness isn't empty. No, it's alive, a suffocating press of unseen things brushing against me with wet, probing fingers, their whispers threading through my mind like worms burrowing into rotten fruit. And I try to scream, but my voice is gone, stolen, just like my body, just like my name. I'm falling, but there's no ground, only the endless void and the echoes of the board's laughter, that same cruel, clicking sound the planchette made as it spelled out my doom. Time doesn't exist here, or maybe it's all that exists, stretched taut like a nerve. Every second an eternity of gnawing dread as I feel myself unraveling, my thoughts fraying at the edges, memories peeling away like old wallpaper. My childhood, my first case as a lawyer, the way sunlight used to feel on my skin, all of it dissolving into the hungry dark. Then a new sensation, pressure like a hand pressing against my chest, and suddenly, I'm somewhere else, a place that shouldn't be, a grotesque mockery of my office, the walls pulsing like flesh, the floor sticky beneath my bare feet, the air thick with the coppery stench of blood. The Ouija board is here too, but it's different now, larger, its surface mottled like decaying skin, the letters warped and bleeding. The planchette sits motionless, but I know it's watching, waiting. A sound makes me turn, a wet, dragging noise, and there's Richard, or what's left of him, his body twisted, his mouth sewn shut with black thread, his eyes wide and pleading as he reaches for me, a silent scream trapped behind his lips. Behind him, others, so many others, shadows with faces I almost recognize, their hands outstretched, their mouths moving in unison, their voices slithering into my ears. You signed. You signed. You signed. The board trembles, the planchette lifting on its own, hovering over the word welcome. And I understand, too late, what it means to inherit the will of the dead. The darkness closes in, the whispers becoming a chorus, and as the last of me is swallowed whole, the planchette moves one final time, spelling out the truth I should have known from the beginning. The house always wins. The moment the planchette settles on that final damning word, the room, no, the world, around me distorts like wax under flame, the walls stretching and bubbling as a chorus of muffled screams rise from the floorboards beneath my feet. My skin prickles with the weight of unseen eyes, thousands of them, blinking in the dark like fireflies made of hunger, and I realize with dawning horror that I'm not alone in this nightmare. I'm just the newest guest. The air is thick with the scent of rust and spoiled milk, each breath coating my tongue in something foul, something alive, and when I try to back away, my heel catches on a loose floorboard. No, not a floorboard, a finger bone, yellowed and jutting from the wood like it had been trying to claw its way out before petrifying mid-escape. The Ouija board is changing, its surface undulating like a living thing, the wood grain twisting into faces that moan and writhe, their mouths forming silent pleas as the planchette begins to move again, slow and deliberate, scraping against the board with a sound like a knife dragged across teeth. I want to look away, but my body isn't mine anymore. My head jerks forward like a puppet on strings, forcing me to watch as the pointer glides to the letter D. Then O, then W, each movement punctuated by a wet, clicking noise from the darkness behind me, something getting closer, something with too many joints in its fingers. The board spells down here, and the floor beneath me gives way with a splintering shriek, plunging me into a cavernous void where the whispers become voices, become screams, become a single, deafening wail that shakes my bones apart. I land in something soft and yielding, flesh, not earth. And when I try to push myself up, my hands sinking up to the wrists, the ground pulsing like a heartbeat beneath me. Above, the board floats in midair, inverted, the planchette spinning wildly before stopping dead on, yours now. And that's when I feel them, the hands, countless, cold, and grasping, rising from the dark to pull me deeper, their grip unbreakable, their whispers a venomous promise. We've been waiting. We've been waiting. We've been. The last thing I see before the darkness swallows me whole is the board, pristine and untouched, materializing on a desk far above me, waiting for the next desperate fool to ask it a question, and the planchette, already trembling in anticipation. The hands pull me deeper into the suffocating blackness, their skeletal fingers pressing into my flesh like brands, and suddenly I realize I can breathe the darkness, thick and syrupy, filling my lungs with the taste of grave soil and rotting parchment. My body is no longer solid, but something malleable, my edges blurring as the whispers stitch themselves into my thoughts, rewriting me from the inside out. The board was never the trap, it was the door, and I flung it wide open when I signed my name in ink that wasn't ink at all, but something far older, far hungrier. Around me, the void reshapes itself into a grotesque parody of Montgomery's study. The furniture stretched and warped, the legal tomes on the shelves now bound in peeling flesh, their spines screaming when I brush against them. The Ouija board sits on the desk, but the letters are wrong, backwards, inverted, the alphabet rearranged into something that hurts to look at. And the planchette isn't wood anymore, but a yellowed fingernail, jagged and twitching. A cold breath slithers down my neck as the realization hits. This is where wills are really read, where legacies are carved not in paper, but in screaming flesh. The shadows behind me coagulate into a shape, Montgomery, but not as he was in life, his mouth unstitching itself with wet, tearing sounds as he leans in to whisper the truth I was too greedy to understand. The board doesn't contact the dead, it evicts the living. His hand, too long, too many knuckles, shoves me forward, and suddenly I'm falling into the board itself, the wood splitting like a wound to swallow me whole. The last thing I hear before the darkness takes me is the planchette skittering to life above me, spelling out my final epitaph in a language that burns. Probate closed. The moment the planchette carves that final damning word, my consciousness fractures, splintering like old wood under an axe, as I'm pulled through the board's surface into a realm where time curdles like spoiled milk. My skin bubbles with the memory of fingers that aren't there, phantom hands still clutching from the world above as I tumble into a courtroom carved from blackened bone. The judge's bench a grinning skull the size of a cathedral. The air reeks of burning hair and legal parchment gone to mold, and I realize with dawning horror that I'm not just trapped, I'm on trial. The jury box rides with figures I almost recognize, Richard with his mouth sewn into a permanent rictus, Montgomery with his face peeled back to reveal something squirming beneath, dozens more with their skin inscribed in tight legal script, their hollow eyes fixed on me as the bailiff, a thing of stretched skin and rusted handcuffs, drags me before the bench. The Ouija board manifests as my accuser, its planchette now a bony finger that jabs at the air, spelling out charges in fire that sear themselves across my flesh. Article I, greed. Article 2, disobedience. Article 3, inheritance fraud. I try to scream, but my mouth fills with ink, thick, cloying, the same that signed my confession, as the judge's gavel, a human femur, cracks against the bench with a sound like a spine snapping. Guilty, booms a voice made of 100 whispering dead, and the walls begin to bleed legal documents, each paragraph a fresh agony as they wrap around my limbs like living contracts. The last thing I see before my eyes are stitched shut with legal red tape is the board floating before me, its surface now a mirror reflecting not my face, but the next unsuspecting soul already reaching for it. Some poor fool in a tailored suit who thinks they're reading a will, never realizing they're signing their own damnation as the planchette twitches to life beneath their fingertips, eager to spell out that most ancient of legal precedents. Caveat emptor. The ink contracts tighten like nooses around my wrists as the courtroom dissolves into a whirlpool of screaming legal parchment, each document fluttering with the desperation of a dying moth before embedding itself into my flesh. Terms and conditions in fine print that now crawl beneath my skin like parasitic worms. The bailiff's handcuffs melt into my bones, fusing with my skeleton in a grotesque mockery of due process, while the judge's skull leers down at me with hollow sockets that somehow still see, still judge. The Ouija board has become the court stenographer, its planchette now a bloodied quill scratching my sentence into reality on parchment made from my own flayed skin, each letter a fresh wound. Sentencing, eternal probate, it etches, and suddenly I understand. This is no mere haunting. This is case law, precedent set in suffering, and I am but the latest defendant in an unbroken chain of fools who thought they could outwit the dead. The jury begins to chant in a guttural drone that vibrates through my teeth. Residential judicata, residential judicata. As the floor beneath me liquefies into a pool of ink-black bile, dragging me down into the appellate court of the damned. The last thing I hear before the darkness takes me completely is the board's triumphant final ruling, spelled out in the arrhythmic clicking of 100 decaying teeth where the planchette used to be. Judgment affirmed. No further appeals. And as my consciousness dissolves into the void, I realize with final, crushing clarity, the board was never just a game. It was discovery, and I had just handed it everything it needed for summary judgment. The darkness swallows me whole, but consciousness remains, a cursed, flickering awareness trapped in the endless void between verdict and execution. My body is gone, yet I still feel the phantom weight of legal documents chaining my soul, each clause a fresh torment branded into my essence. The whispers have become a deafening chorus of every soul who ever dared ignore the board's final instruction, their voices woven into a living legal citation that cites me as the newest precedent. Time has no meaning here, yet I experience every infinite second of my damnation simultaneously. The board's planchette now a rusted scalpel dissecting my soul into Exhibit A through Z, each fragment catalogued in some infernal docket. I try to scream, but my voice only echoes back as a dry rustle of legal briefs in a forgotten archive. The board itself has transformed into something far worse, an endless parchment scroll unfurling through the void, its surface inked in the suffering of all who came before me, with fresh blank space waiting at the bottom, waiting for the next foolhardy executor to pick up the pen. I finally understand the terrible truth. This isn't possession or damnation. This is case law. The board doesn't kill. It establishes precedent. And as I feel my consciousness being bound into the eternal record, the last coherent thought I'll ever have sears through me. The next victim is already out there, right now, their fingers hovering over the planchette, utterly unaware they're not contacting the dead. They're filing an appeal on behalf of the dead, with my tormented soul as the filing fee. The parchment trembles with anticipation. Somewhere a pen is being picked up. The court of the damned is forever in session. The parchment of my damnation stretches infinitely before me, its surface now writhing with the tortured signatures of every soul who ever defied the board's final instruction. A macabre class action lawsuit against the living. I feel my essence being distilled into ink, forced through the nib of some spectral pen, as it adds my confession to the growing ledger of the damned. The whispers have crystallized into a perpetual voir dire, an endless jury selection where the panel is always hungry. Suddenly, the void convulses with the unmistakable sensation of a new case being filed, some poor fool's fingers brushing against the board's surface in the world above, and the entire nightmare apparatus shudders to life. The planchette, now a barbed quill, jabs at my consciousness, demanding I testify against the new defendant. My screams become precedent, my agony becomes evidence, my eternal torment becomes case law. The board isn't just a cursed object, it's an entire adversarial legal system from beyond the grave, and I've been disbarred from existence. As I'm dragged before the bench again, the judge's robes now stitched from the skin of previous executors, I realize with final, devastating clarity, probate never ends. The estate always remains open, and the dead are always hiring new counsel. The gavel falls. The quill moves. Another name is being added to the docket. The court is now forever in session. The gavel's echo never fades. It reverberates through my hollowed-out soul like a death knell, each oscillation peeling back another layer of my humanity until nothing remains but the cold, precise machinery of supernatural jurisprudence. I am no longer a man, but a legal citation, Whitmore J. In re-damnation eternity sup. 2D, a footnote in some greater, more terrible brief being drafted in the bowels of this infernal court. The new case files in with a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut, and I feel myself being weaponized, my suffering molded into precedent used to damn the next executor who thought they could outmaneuver the dead. The board has become something far more sophisticated now. Not just a conduit, but an entire judicial framework, its planchette a cursor blinking hungrily on some cosmic docket, waiting to input the next victim's particulars. The whispers have coalesced into a relentless legal commentary, citing my case as controlling authority whenever some poor soul hesitates before signing. I try to resist, but my objections are overruled before they form, the ultimate summary judgment rendered against my soul. The parchment scrolls onward, infinite and insatiable, and as I watch the newest name materialize in blood-black ink, I realize with perfect, paralyzing clarity, this isn't hell. This is just discovery. The real trial hasn't even begun, and we're all just character witnesses for the prosecution. The realization crashes over me like a wave of burning filings. I am not just a precedent, but an instrument of the court, my agony now entered into evidence against each new soul foolish enough to touch the board. The planchette has become a merciless bailiff, its movements no longer spelling words but serving subpoenas, each glide across the board dragging another living soul into this eternal class action nightmare. I feel the exact moment the newest victim, some greedy great-nephew or careless estate attorney, makes contact, their fingers triggering a cosmic voir dire that rips through the veil between worlds. My consciousness is forcibly merged with theirs as the board establishes personal jurisdiction, their terrified breaths becoming my own, their pulse thundering in time with the judge's gavel. The legal citations carved into my soul now glow like burning brands, illuminating the terrible truth. Every warning I ignored, every skeptical chuckle I made at Montgomery's instructions, every avaricious thought, they weren't just mistakes. They were admissions against interest, and the court has entered them into the permanent record. The newest defendant screams as the planchette moves of its own accord to spell motion to compel granted. And I realize with fresh horror that we're not in the trial phase at all. We're still in discovery, and the dead have only just begun to depose the living. The parchment unfurls further, revealing line after line of blank space waiting to be filled with fresh confessions, each signature another brick in the wall of this expanding infernal jurisprudence. Somewhere beyond the void, a law student picks up an antique Ouija board at a garage sale, and the gavel falls again. Court is adjourned, never adjourned. The docket grows eternal. Story number 5. The day we moved into the house on Blackthorn Lane, I remember thinking how perfect it all felt. The way the sunlight filtered through the ancient oak in the front yard, casting dappled shadows on the wraparound porch. The creak of the hardwood floors underfoot like a whispered welcome. The smell of aged wood and faint lavender lingering in the air, as if the house itself was exhaling its history. My partner, Jess, had found the listing online, a sprawling Victorian with original stained glass and a price that seemed too good to be true. But the realtor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, assured us it was a steal, a hidden gem just waiting for the right owners. We signed the papers in a haze of excitement, barely skimming the fine print, too giddy over the idea of turning those high-ceilinged rooms into our forever home. The first night, we celebrated with takeout on the living room floor, laughing about how the previous owners had left behind a few odd pieces of furniture, an ornate mirror in the hallway, a clawfoot table in the dining room, things we'd joked gave the place character. It wasn't until the next afternoon, while exploring the basement, that we found the Ouija board tucked away in a dusty corner, its surface faded but still legible, the letters and numbers worn smooth by time. Jess, ever the skeptic, grinned and said it was probably some kid's toy, but I felt a prickle of unease as I ran my fingers over the planchette, its pointed edge cool against my skin. "Let's try it," Jess said, already setting it on the floor, and before I could protest, their fingers were on the planchette, mine hovering reluctantly beside them. "Is anyone here?" they asked, their voice light, teasing, and at first, nothing happened. Just the distant hum of the furnace, the occasional groan of the house settling. But then, So slowly it could have been our imagination, the planchette began to move. It slid to yes, and Jess's eyes met mine, a flicker of amusement still dancing in them. But I couldn't shake the chill creeping up my spine. "Who are you?" Jess asked, and the planchette moved again, this time spelling out letters with deliberate, almost angry precision. "You're in my room." We both laughed, Jess insisting it was the other pushing, but the laughter died in my throat when the planchette suddenly shot to goodbye, the force of it knocking our hands away. We left the board in the basement after that, dismissing it as a weird prank, maybe left behind by the previous owner's kids. But that night, I woke to the sound of something scratching against the wall, a slow, deliberate drag like fingernails on plaster. Jess slept soundly beside me, and I told myself it was just the house, just the wind, but then I heard it, a whisper, so faint it could have been the rustle of the curtains, but it wasn't. "You're in my room," it said, and I froze, my breath coming in shallow gasps, my fingers digging into the sheets. The next morning, I called Diane, my voice shaking as I asked about the previous owners, and her silence on the other end of the line was louder than any scream. "What do you mean?" she finally said, her tone careful, measured. "That house hasn't been listed in years. The last owners died there, a murder-suicide in the master bedroom. The family refused to sell. It's been empty ever since." The blood drained from my face as I hung up, Jess staring at me from across the kitchen, their expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror as I repeated Diane's words. That night we packed our bags, too terrified to stay, but as we turned to leave, the Ouija board was on the kitchen table, the planchette already moving, spelling out time to go. The lights flickered, the temperature plummeted, and from the hallway came the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, each one echoing like a hammer strike against my ribs. The front door slammed shut on its own, the lock clicking into place, and then the whispers started, dozens of them overlapping, hissing. "You're in my room, you're in my room," until the words lost all meaning, until the air itself felt thick with malice. Jess grabbed my hand, their grip bruising, and we backed toward the basement door, the only exit left. But as I reached for the handle, the whispers stopped, replaced by a single guttural voice, so close it could have been inside my head. Too late. The last thing I remember is the door swinging open on its own, the darkness beyond it yawning wide, hungry, and the feeling of something cold and impossibly strong wrapping around my wrist, pulling me in. They say houses have memories, that they hold on to the things that happen inside them. But they never tell you what happens when the house decides it's not done with you. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced I'm back in that basement, the Ouija board in front of me, the planchette moving on its own, spelling out words I can't bear to read. Jess is gone, vanished that night, but I still hear their voice, whispering from somewhere in the walls, telling me it's time to go, that we never should have moved into the wrong house. And the worst part, I think the house agrees. The police called it a missing persons case, but I know the truth. Jess never left that house, not really, because sometimes at night, when the walls creak in a way that's too deliberate to be the wind, I hear their voice, muffled but unmistakable, calling my name from somewhere deep inside the walls, a sound that starts as a whisper and rises into a scream that cuts off abruptly, as if something has clamped a hand over their mouth. I tried to go back once, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a desperate, foolish hope that I could find some trace of them. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, the front door swung open on its own, revealing a darkness so thick it looked solid, and from inside came the faint but unmistakable sound of the planchette scraping across the Ouija board, moving in slow, deliberate circles. I ran that night, ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, but no matter how far I get, I still wake up gasping at 3:17 a.m. every night, the exact time the door locked itself, my skin crawling with the sensation of unseen fingers tracing my spine, my ears ringing with those same 3 words. "You're in my room." The new owners, a young couple, just like we were, moved in last month, and sometimes I drive past, watching from a distance as they laugh on the porch, oblivious, their hands clasped, their future stretching ahead of them like an open road. I should warn them, I know I should, but every time I try my throat closes up, my words dissolving into static, Because what if the house hears me? What if it decides it wants me back? The last time I parked outside, just staring at the darkened windows, I swear I saw Jess's face pressed against the glass of the attic, their eyes wide and unblinking, their mouth moving soundlessly, forming the same phrase over and over, time to go. And now, as I sit here writing this, the air in my apartment has gone cold, the scent of lavender and aged wood curling into the room like an invitation. And I know, with a certainty that chills me deeper than any ghost story ever could, that the house isn't done with me yet. The Ouija board is on my doorstep this morning, the planchette already centered, waiting, and from somewhere far away, but also right beside me, Jess's voice whispers, "You shouldn't have left me here." The worst part? I think I'm gonna open the door. I think I'm gonna let it in. I don't remember walking to the door, but suddenly my hand is on the knob, the metal so cold it burns, and the wood beneath my palm pulses like a living thing, like the house is breathing through the grain. The Ouija board sits just beyond the threshold, pristine despite the years, the planchette trembling ever so slightly, as if something beneath it is pressing up, eager to move. I should slam the door, call for help, do anything but what I'm doing. But my fingers are already reaching for the planchette, my body moving without my permission, like a marionette pulled by strings I can't see. The moment my skin touches the plastic, the air in my apartment curdles, the walls warping inward as if the room itself is collapsing. And then I hear it. Not just Jess's voice now, but others, dozens, layered over one another in a chorus of whispers, all saying the same thing. Welcome back. The floor drops away, or maybe I'm the one falling, but suddenly I'm standing in the basement of the house on Blackthorn Lane, the smell of damp earth and something older, something rotting thick in my nose. The Ouija board is on the floor in front of me, the planchette skittering wildly, spelling out words too fast to follow, and then freezing. The whispers stop. The air goes still. Behind me, the staircase creaks under the weight of something climbing, something that doesn't bother to hide its footsteps, and I know, with a clarity sharper than fear, that I was never meant to leave this house. Jess was just the beginning. The first step lands heavy on the basement floor, then the second, and I can't turn around, can't move at all, because the planchette is locked onto goodbye, and the thing behind me is breathing, wet and ragged, right against the back of my neck. The last thing I see before the darkness swallows me whole is the board, the letters glinting in the dim light as the planchette drags itself, slowly, deliberately, to a single word, mine. And then the screaming starts, mine, Jess's, and all the others who came before us, our voices twisting together until I can't tell where I end and the house begins. They say home is where the heart is, but they never tell you what happens when the house decides to keep it. The screaming never stops, not really, it just changes shape, folding into the walls, seeping into the floorboards, becoming part of the house's endless, hungry sigh. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't move right anymore. The basement is always dark, always cold, but sometimes the door at the top of the stairs creaks open, and I see them, the new owners, their faces bright with that same naive excitement Jess and I once had. They don't see me, not yet, but they will. The house shows me things now, lets me watch through the cracks in the walls as they laugh in the kitchen, as they argue over paint colors, as they find the Ouija board tucked away in a closet they swear they've never opened. The woman, her name is Lauren, I've heard him say it, picks up the planchette with a smirk, her fingers brushing the plastic just like mine did, and I want to scream, to warn her, but my voice is just another whisper in the walls now, another echo the house swallows whole. The man, Daniel, rolls his eyes but places his fingers beside hers, and I watch, helpless, as the planchette twitches, then drags itself to the same words it showed us. You're in my room. Lauren laughs, but Daniel's face goes pale. He feels it. The house has already chosen him. The air shifts, the temperature drops, and from the corner of my eye, I see Jess, or what's left of them, their form flickering like a dying light, their mouths stretched too wide, their eyes hollow. They don't speak, not with words, but I understand. The house is hungry again. It's always hungry. The planchette jerks violently, spelling out new words, words I never saw before. Stay forever. Lauren's laughter cuts off. The lights flicker, and then, from somewhere deep in the house, the front door slams shut. The moment the door slams, Lauren's fingers fly off the planchette like she's been burned, but Daniel's remain frozen in place, his knuckles whitening as the plastic piece digs into his skin, dragging itself toward goodbye with unnatural force. I try to scream through the walls, my voice joining the chorus of others trapped here, but all that comes out is the faintest creak of floorboards underfoot, just enough to make Lauren's head snap up, her eyes scanning the room with dawning terror. "Did you hear that?" she whispers, but Daniel doesn't answer, his pupils dilated black, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the planchette suddenly flips upside down and carves a long, jagged scratch across the board's surface. The lights surge bright, too bright, before plunging us into darkness, and in that split second of blindness, I see them, all of us, our faces pressed against the inside of the walls, our mouths open in silent wails, our fingers clawing at peeling wallpaper that will never tear. The emergency lights flicker on just as Daniel's chair topples backward, his body convulsing as unseen hands drag him across the floor toward the basement door, his fingernails splintering against hardwood as Lauren shrieks his name. The Ouija board erupts in flames without heat, the letters curling to ash except for one phrase glowing ember red. "Now you see." Lauren stumbles toward the hallway mirror, the same ornate one Jess and I joked about, and her reflection doesn't move when she does. It smiles. It reaches out, and as the glass ripples like water, I realize with sickening clarity why the house let me watch. Every new soul makes us stronger. Every terrified gasp feeds the hunger, and soon Lauren's screams will join ours, echoing through rooms that never belonged to any of us, in a house that was never really for sale. The last thing I hear before the darkness swallows her whole is the planchette clattering to the floor, spinning wildly before landing on the only word that matters, more. The spinning planchette slows to a stop, but the air remains charged, thick with the scent of burning wood and something metallic, like old blood stirred awake. Lauren's reflection is gone from the mirror, but the glass still ripples, distorting the room behind it into something jagged and wrong. Daniel's body lies motionless near the basement door, his limbs twisted at impossible angles, his mouth frozen mid-scream. But his eyes are wide open, darting frantically as if watching something we can't see. The house groans, a deep, shuddering sound that vibrates through my bones, and suddenly I'm not just watching anymore. I'm being pulled forward, my formless presence dragged toward the Ouija board as if summoned. The scorched letters on its surface begin to reform, the ash rearranging itself into new words. Help them. For the first time since the house took me, I feel something other than terror, a spark of defiance, a memory of who I was before the darkness swallowed me whole. The planchette twitches, and this time, it's not the house moving it, it's me. My essence, whatever fractured piece of me remains, presses against it with everything I have, forcing it toward the letters leave. The air shrieks in protest, the walls trembling as if the house itself is furious, but I don't stop. The other trapped voices surge with me, their whispers rising to a crescendo, and for a single fleeting moment, the planchette glows white-hot, searing the word into the board before the house's presence crashes down like a tidal wave, smothering us back into submission. The lights return with a pop, revealing Lauren standing in the center of the room, her back to me, her shoulders hunched. She turns slowly, and when her eyes meet mine, really meet mine, I realize she can see me. Her lips part, not to scream, but to mouth two words, "Thank you." Then the house reclaims her. The walls bleed shadows, wrapping around her like living tendrils, pulling her into the mirror where her reflection once stood. The glass shatters, but the fragments don't fall. They hover, each shard reflecting a different face, a different soul the house has claimed. The Ouija board lies still, the planchette resting on goodbye, but I know the truth now. The house may be hungry, but we're hungrier, for freedom, for vengeance, for the chance to twist its own darkness against it. And as the first cracks spiderweb across the ceiling, as the foundation groans beneath an unseen weight, I realize we're not trapped anymore. We're lying in wait. The next time the door opens, the next time the board is used, The house will learn what happens when the dead decide they're done playing by its rules. The planchette trembles. The walls hold their breath. And somewhere, deep in the bones of this cursed place, the first brick crumbles. The house knows we've turned against it. I feel it in the way the floorboards tense like clenched teeth. The way the air curdles into something thick and resistant, pushing back against us with every shuddering breath the walls take. But it's too late. The crack in the ceiling spreads like lightning, splitting the plaster with a sound like breaking bones. And through the gap, I see them, all of us. Our faces no longer twisted in fear, but in something sharper, something darker. The mirror shards tremble where they hover, each fragment reflecting not just our stolen faces, but the house's true form. The rot festering in its beams, the stains it tried to hide beneath fresh paint, the endless, gnawing hunger that made it devour us in the first place. The Ouija board flips violently, the planchette skittering across the floor like a thing alive. But this time, it's not spelling words, it's carving them into the wood, gouging out letters with a screech that sets the whole house shaking. Your turn. The front door flies open with a crash, wind howling through the halls. But it's not an escape, it's an invitation. Outside, the realtor, Diane, stands frozen on the porch, her keys dangling from one hand, her face draining of color as she takes in the wreckage of the living room, the shattered mirror, the way Daniel's body is gone from the floor, but his scream still echoes faintly in the walls. She takes a step back, but the door slams shut behind her. The house has a new appetite now, not for the innocent, but for the ones who fed us to it. Diane stumbles toward the Ouija board, her breath coming in panicked hitches, and I realize with a thrill that tastes like vengeance that she recognizes it. This wasn't just some abandoned relic. She brought it here, left it for us to find, knowing what would happen. The planchette lunges for her fingers the moment she gets close, clamping down like teeth, and the whispers in the walls rise to a roar as the board spells out its final message. Welcome home. The house groans, the foundation crumbling as we surge forward, no longer trapped but unleashed. And as Diane's screams join the chorus in the walls, the last thing I see before the darkness takes her is the faintest flicker of the for sale sign outside, toppling to the ground with a rusted sigh. The house got what it wanted, but so did we. Diane's screams don't last. Nothing ever does in this house, but her terror lingers like perfume, thick and cloying, seeping into the cracks we've torn open in the walls. The moment the house consumed her, something shifted. The air tastes different now, charged with a bitter electricity that makes the remaining mirror shards vibrate like struck tuning forks. The Ouija board lies shattered in the corner, its pieces still twitching as if trying to reform. But it's too late. We don't need it anymore. We are the message now. The walls pulse with our collective heartbeat, the foundation groaning under the weight of what we've become. And outside, the for sale sign doesn't just topple. It sinks, the earth beneath it opening like a mouth, swallowing the last proof this house was ever meant for the living. The new cracks in the ceiling spread wider, not from decay but from something pushing through. And when I look up, I see them, Jess, Daniel, Lauren, Diane, all the others, not as fractured spirits, but as something sharper, our edges honed by the house's own cruelty. We don't whisper anymore. We hum, a low, resonant frequency that makes the pipes burst, the windows warp, the front door rattle on its hinges like it's trying to escape. The house fights back, of course. The floorboards snap upward like bear traps. The lights flare hot enough to scorch. The thermostat plummets until our breath hangs frozen in the air. But it's no use. We've learned its tricks. We are its tricks. The realtor's keys still jingle where they fell on the floor. And as I focus on them, they rise, twisting in midair like a spider testing its silk, before shooting toward the basement door with enough force to splinter the wood. The lock clicks open. The door creaks ajar. And from the darkness below, something new answers. Not the house. Not us. Something older. Something even the house was afraid of. The humming stops. The air stills. And in that silence, the basement exhales, a long, wet sigh that smells of turned earth and open graves. The house shudders, its defiance crumbling like old brick, and I realize with a giddiness that borders on madness that we were never the prey. We were the bait. The first tendril of shadow slithers up the basement stairs, then another, then a dozen more, and as they wrap around the banister, the walls, the last functioning light bulb, the house does something I've never heard it do before. It screams. The keys melt and the doors lock. The mirror shards dissolve into smoke. And the Ouija board's final desperate message, scratched into the floor by a force neither living nor dead, is just one word, over and over, until the wood gives way. Run, run, run. But there's nowhere left to go. The shadows don't discriminate. And as they surge upward, swallowing the house whole, I do the only thing left to do. I reach out. I welcome them in. After all, they're not here for the house. They're here for what's inside it. And we are so hungry. The shadows don't slither anymore. They pour, a flood of living darkness rising from the basement like a tidal wave of ink, swallowing the house whole, dissolving walls and floors and memories into nothing but a chorus of screaming silence. I should be afraid, but I'm not. None of us are. We stretch our borrowed limbs, Jess's hands, Daniel's voice, Lauren's eyes, Diane's smile, and step forward to meet them. The house's screams reach a fever pitch, its structure buckling inward, but the sound is sweet, sweeter than anything I've heard since the day we moved in. The shadows don't touch us. They move around us, through us, like we're old friends, like we belong. And then I understand. We were never prisoners here. We were incubators. The house didn't feed on us. It fed us, fattened us up on fear and grief until we were ripe enough to become something else. The shadows coil around my wrists, not to restrain but to welcome. And when they speak, it's not in words but in sensations. The scrape of nails against bone, the wet pop of a spine realigning, the delicious terror of a door locking from the inside. The last of the house's resistance crumbles as the shadows peel back the illusion, revealing the truth beneath. This was never a home. It was a throat, and we are the teeth it's been growing for decades. The front door bursts open, not to let something in, but to let us out. The neighborhood sleeps under a moonless sky, streetlights flickering as we step onto the porch, our shadows stretching long and hungry across the lawn. Somewhere nearby, a dog whimpers. A baby monitor crackles with static. The house groans one final time behind us, collapsing in on itself like a deaf-flung lung. And as the first tendrils of dawn creep over the horizon, I realize we don't need the house anymore. We are the house now, and the world is so full of doors. The streetlights flicker as we step off the porch, our shadows stretching unnaturally long across the dew-slick grass, merging together into one pulsing mass of darkness that seems to drink in the pale morning light rather than be defined by it. The air smells different out here, not the stale lavender and rot of the house, but something alive, something vulnerable, and it makes the thing we've become twitch with anticipation. The baby monitor's static resolves into a gurgling coo from the house next door, and without discussion, without thought, we move toward it, our steps perfectly synchronized, the creak of floorboards following us even though we're outside now, because the house is in us, with us, part of us. The neighbor's front door is unlocked. They always leave it unlocked. We remember suddenly, though we've never met them, because the house has been watching this street far longer than we've been trapped inside it, compiling secrets like a spider weaving its web. The hinges don't squeak as we push it open. The shadows see to that. Inside, the smell of coffee and baby powder wraps around us, comforting, tempting, and upstairs, a woman sings softly to her child. We climb the steps without making a sound, our collective breath held not out of necessity, but for the sheer pleasure of anticipation. And when we reach the nursery door, we see it. A Ouija board tucked half under the crib, the same model as ours, the planchette placed neatly at the center. The mother turns, her lullaby dying in her throat as she sees us standing there, but it's too late. The planchette is already moving. The shadows are already spreading. And as the first tendrils of darkness curl around the crib's legs, we smile with Diane's mouth, whisper with Lauren's voice, and reach out with Jess's hands, because the house was just the beginning. The real haunting starts now. The mother's scream lodges in her throat like a trapped bird as our shadow spills across the nursery floor. The mobile above the crib spinning wildly though no window is open. the plastic animals twisting into grotesque shapes as they pass through our darkness. The planchette leaps from the Ouija board without being touched, clattering against the hardwood as it spells out two words we know too well. My turn. The baby gurgles, reaching chubby fingers toward us, and for a fractured second I remember sunlight, remember laughter, remember what it was to be human. But the memory dissolves as the shadows surge forward, pouring into the child's open mouth, its wide eyes blooming black like ink dropped in milk. The mother collapses, her body convulsing as our presence fills the room, the house, the neighborhood, the cracks between worlds where forgotten things wait and hunger. The walls begin to bleed, not blood but something thicker, something older, and the stain spreads faster than the mother's scream as her child's first word bubbles from its lips in a voice that is ours and not ours, the houses and not the houses, a chorus of the damned speaking through one perfect, unstained throat. More. Outside, up and down Blackthorn Lane, porch lights flicker and die as front doors swing open on their own, as windows darken one by one like eyes closing in death. And beneath it all, beneath the terror and the ecstasy of our becoming, I feel the last shred of who I was tremble and snap as the shadows whisper the terrible, glorious truth. We were never the haunted. We were always the haunting, and the night is so young.